Get started here a few minutes after. Thank you for your patience. I was trying to set up this second monitor. So, okay. Welcome to our April 2025. I had to remember what month it is for a second. DDRS advisory meeting, our lengthy, a little bit longer meeting that we are going to have, and hopefully everyone enjoys. I have a video, but I didn't have time. We were dealing with this to get it pulled up, so we'll do that at the end again. It is an employment video that vocational rehab. Teresa, I might have you kind of introduce it once we do it at the end, but that some of our VR staff have put together around employment. So we'll share that toward the end. It's working. Look at you. A little tech savvy over here. Okay. So here is our agenda today. We will have obviously introductions, go around and say hello to everyone. Kelly will provide some DDRS updates, while Teresa Colzar, who will provide our BRS update, have a quick break because we were both talking. We all need some breaks, and 3 hours is a long time. So just take a quick break. If you need an email, check an email, take a phone call. Restrooms are out there if you need obviously in between. And then Holly will provide a BDS update, and we will have the parking lot just for any items that we don't have time to discuss or that we maybe need to add and talk about at the next agenda. We will skip this for right now. Heather is going to help me out down there because I did, Lexi, unfortunately, she is going to be on, but she wasn't able to attend in person. And Noah wasn't able to attend as well. So I'm going to have Heather help me because she has the list of folks pulled up already. And so just let us know if you're here or not.
All right, Kelly Mitchell.
Here. Good morning.
Dr. Jim Wilkes.
Here.
Sean Fulton.
Here.
Katie Stafford Cunningham.
Here.
Talee Clark.
Here.
Laura Fife.
Here.
Lexi Westerfield. Kate Barrow. Kim Dotson.
I'm here.
Lisa Paddock.
Here.
Melissa Keys.
Here.
Carrie Lee.
Here.
Derek Nord.
Yep. Here.
Loretta Springer. Ian Titus. And Kim Hahn. All right.
Thank you, Heather. Appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, turn it over to Kelly.
Well, my updates are going to be very brief this morning because we do have a jam-packed agenda and some work to do. So I want to move us forward. As you might well imagine, we're in the middle of legislative session, so we're staying busy, just, providing information and preparing for the end of session, and then to implement whatever is put forth from that particular session. I do want to note, though, for all of you, if you are not aware, in January we re-implemented, I guess I should say, a process that involves sharing financial and programmatic outcomes with the public, and that's called a quarterly financial review. The first of the quarterly financial reviews will be hosted on May the 2nd. That is the current plan here in the Government Center. I believe in the auditorium. There will be a bulletin or an announcement coming forth from FSSA, and then also through our various listservs, through the DDRS listservs. This is the entire agency, not just the Division of Disability and Rehabilitative Services. Each division within the agency will have approximately an hour, about 50 minutes or so, to present information. It's in person in the auditorium, will be the room. And I believe that it will be live streamed for viewing. So more to come on that, but I've had a few questions as to when that would be. And at the present time, there's a plan for May the 2nd, barring any unforeseen circumstances that, that might predicate a change to that. So other than that, we're just continuing to move forward with many of the initiatives that we will be discussing today. I'll turn it over, Jessica.
Thanks. Oh, I just wanted to make sure, sorry, I can go ahead and share this. For Christina, the Indiana Early Intervention Conference, just in case you haven't seen this, I don't know, I think it's gone out publicly as well, right? I mean, it's live. So just in case you want to share, this is, again, in Bloomington, in June. So, that is the link. I know obviously you guys aren't going to write that down, but it will be in the slides. And if you Google it too, it's very easy. It'll pop right up. So just in case you want to share, attend, or share out too with your networks. Teresa, I'll try to follow your lead.
That's fine. Yeah, I just wanted to grab this to take notes. So I'm gonna make you all do some of the work today. If you want to go ahead and plow forward. Okay, really, I wanted to spend some time today. I just have a couple updates near the end, but we just wrapped up our comprehensive statewide needs assessment, which is something we complete every 3 years. And I just wanted to go through some of the why is this required? One, it's a requirement, so we do it. It's a federal requirement, but also what is the intent of the needs assessment? What were some of the high or big takeaways or themes? And then what were the targeted recommendations that resulted? And that is where I'd love to get some idea sharing, some feedback on how we can get creative with implementing some of these recommendations, especially in a climate where we're working to stretch, right? To stretch our resources to serve more people. There's not a lot of ability to invest in new opportunities right now. So just getting some feedback from you all on how we can get creative there. All right, so the purpose, the objective is to evaluate needs of individuals with disabilities who live in Indiana. And specifically, there's a few focus populations that the needs assessment is to evaluate in particular. And that is one, those with the most significant disabilities, including needs for supported employment services. Those who've been unserved or underserved, and that is kind of to be defined by the respondents, who is underserved, who is underserved, and what are their needs. Served through other components of the workforce development system, so other core WIOA workforce programs, and then who are youth and students with disabilities in particular, including their need for pre-employment transition services, as well as general transition coordination types of services with local schools. And then also the needs assessment is to evaluate any need for what are called establishment projects. And those can do a couple of things, establish, develop new community rehab providers, or improve and expand the capacity of current community rehabilitation providers. So very quick slide here on some takeaways and some themes. This will be posted online here in the coming weeks, and you can enjoy the 100-some page documents at your leisure. But this is a very quick summary of, again, those big takeaways, those big themes, aside from some of the more obvious things that we kind of always expect to be in there. Of note, almost 80% of individuals that were served in the VR system, and the data set here was a 3-year period. It was essentially state fiscal year 2022 through state fiscal year 2024. So about a 3-year data set. So during that time frame, almost 80% were individuals with the most significant disability. Probably not super surprising given that we had an order of selection in place during those 3 years. We had opened priority category 2 in 2023. So saw a little bit of an uptick in folks in other disability priority categories, but just to frame the population that we've largely been serving during that 3-year period. About 28% of that population were students or youth, and over 43% of the entire VR population in that time frame were under the age of 30. So fairly young population. That is pretty common across the nation with VR, especially post WIOA and post implementation of pre-employment transition services.
Teresa, just for everyone's benefit,
Yeah.
would you explain what WIOA is?
Sure. Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, so federal law, federal legislation that passed in 2014 that reauthorized the Rehabilitation Act, which authorizes the VR program. And there were it was probably the biggest modern, the biggest change in the VR program in modern times here. And implemented a 15% set aside. So moving 15% of dollars over to services, pre-employment transition services for students with disabilities, increased a lot of federal reporting, implemented activities like career counseling, information and referral for folks employed in 14C or sub-minimum wage settings or seeking that type of employment, and seek to better align VR with other workforce programs. That's your quick WIOA.
That was
commercial.
perfect.
Yes.
Thank you.
And the regulations came out in 2016. So there's been kind of a graduated implementation of these different requirements since 2016. Let's see, almost 1 in 5, almost 20% of folks served were individuals of a racial or ethnic minority group. Interestingly, the portion of individuals served by region. So in VR, we have 5 different regions, kind of a northwest, north central, northeast, kind of down on the eastern side of Indiana. Region 2, region 3 is Indianapolis and the Donuts and up to Lafayette. Region 4 is kind of the near bottom strip of the state, sort of Terre Haute over through, Columbus, Bloomington, and then region 5 is the bottom tip. So obviously there are some different, population sizes across those 5 regions. Region 2, for instance, region 1, 2, and 3 have a larger volume of individuals, whereas region 4 and 5 have a little bit of a smaller population, but just as much ground or more ground to cover because of maybe more the rural nature or the geographic spread of those regions. And really the portion of individuals served across those 5 regions was very proportionate to the population size in those 5 regions. We capture a primary as well as a secondary impairment at the time of eligibility and determination of the significance or the priority category assignment of those eligible individuals. So for those looking at just primary impairments, individuals with a developmental or intellectual disability was the most common. So 36.3% of individuals, again, in that 3-year time frame. And this really mirrors most of the history as well as the current climate. 36.3% had a primary impairment of intellectual developmental disability. So just over a third. And then when looking at secondary impairments for the entire population, mental health condition was the most common impairment as a secondary impairment. So almost half of the individuals in our system, 46.3%, had a secondary impairment of mental health condition. Now, those with a primary impairment of mental health condition, not on the slide, but that is still around like 29% of folks with a primary impairment of a mental health condition. This is the one that was interesting. Individuals in rural communities actually closed successfully at a slightly higher rate, just a couple of percentage points. But often we assume that there may be less opportunities, right? Or maybe more difficult to get to work if you are in a more rural community. And our data shows that that's not only not the case, but there's actually a little bit of a higher success rate for those in those more rural settings, which is really interesting.
That's all.
It'd be interesting to drill down into that. You saw me smile and, I have my own assumption around that because I come from a more rural area. And I would tend to believe it has something to do with relationship building and networking, which is perhaps we could learn from that.
Yep, absolutely.
Teresa, do they compare this,
People
like
are
the
figuring it out,
feds, do
right?
they look
Yeah.
at the other states, obviously, like, to see, like, just out of curiosity, if Indiana's, is this similar? No, I don't, like,
I mean, we are compared all the time,
Yeah.
but not necessarily through the
Okay.
needs assessment,
Okay.
through lots of other data that,
Gotcha, okay.
that we submit.
That also seems to fly just a bit in the face of sometimes what we hear.
Yes,
Is
and we're gonna
that-
talk a little bit about.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. very
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Average cost per case is around just over 6,600 during that 3-year period. I can tell you this has been trending up and we are working to try to figure out how to do a better job maybe containing that. But we've certainly, based on the types of goods that we purchase, we have been subject, of course, to inflation. Melissa, go ahead.
Is that cost calculated based on the salary of the VRC or based on direct equipment purchased?
That is purchase
Vehicle
services.
modifications, whatever.
Yeah,
So-
all
okay.
purchase services. Yeah,
Okay. So that doesn't include the VRC's
no,
salary.
right,
Okay.
right. It doesn't include those, right. Some of the themes, so transportation and loss of benefits were commonly cited as barriers, which we see every go round. However, similar to what we learned in the last needs assessment in 2022, individuals with disabilities do not cite this as high of a barrier as staff and providers and community partners. So it was ranked very high as a barrier among staff surveys, provider surveys, community partner surveys. Still ranked as a barrier for individuals with disabilities, but pretty significantly, at a pretty significantly lower level.
That's both of those transportation. Yeah. You say
Yes.
loss of benefits, gotcha.
Yes, yeah. A common theme, which we also see in our customer satisfaction surveys, is that services are just not provided quickly enough, right? Staff capacity challenges were cited as well, turnover, working with a lot of different staff. A need for increased training. Participants felt that there was a need for sometimes providers, sometimes VR counselors to maybe have increased training in serving certain populations or in conducting certain services. Improved communication was also cited as an area we could do better in terms of the responsiveness, the timeliness, as well as just, I think, communication in terms of more better understanding where individuals are coming from and their backgrounds and how to best work with them in progressing toward their goals. Reducing complexity of the system, seeing where we can simplify. And then again, this theme, improved services for working with folks with mental health conditions. This has been a theme at least on the last 2 statewide needs assessments, if not more. So that continues to be an area where staff seem to be challenged in terms of serving that population in the most effective way that we could be.
Teresa, is that cost good? I don't really know. Did you, you know what I'm saying? I mean, is that like,
High, low.
yeah, I don't know. Or do you know? It's okay. I just was curious. Like
I
that
mean-
seems not high to me. I mean, but again, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. We'd have to compare it to states
I
that
was
have a
curious, like,
similar,
Okay.
Similar rates, and
Okay.
there's a lot of factors that would need to be considered. To
It just
come to
didn't
a
seem,
fair-
it seemed pretty reasonable. to me,
Yeah, I
but-
mean, generally people are staying in the system for about 2.5 or so years in VR, and annual costs are around 3,000 a year. So this sort of
Right.
adds up with that
Okay.
particular statistic that we poll. Again, if folks are staying about 2.5 years or so. Now, again, we are seeing that cost tick up a bit each year as things like, tuition get more expensive, purchase goods get more expensive, mileage,
Yes.
those,
Just in
travel
living in
costs, those
general.
kinds of things. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, next slide.
Sorry.
This
Did
is
I-
a
Did
little
I
more.
go too fast? Sorry.
Nope, I think this is fine. This is a little more breakdown of population served, looking at primary and secondary disability by those. And these are very hot, these are very broad disability categories. Of course, we all know this. There's lots of different experiences and specific conditions that may, fit or fall under each of these areas. This, again, just very broad categories. You can see again, the 36.3% primary disability IDD, followed by about 29.5% folks with behavioral or mental health disabilities, a little over 20%. So a little over 1/5 of the population had some kind of physical mobility type of impairment. And then 13.6% had a primary impairment of a sensory disability. So blind, low vision, deaf, hard of hearing. And then secondary, you can see those with mental health disability are the largest group in terms of secondary impairment, again, 46%, IDD, 28%, physical disability, again, about 1/5, and then sensory, about 4% as a secondary.
So looking at the.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
No, no,
Sorry.
it's okay.
I don't know if you want to
Well,
rock,
looking
paper,
at that, like,
scissors there.
IDD, it would be roughly 60% because you would add both of the top and the bottom. And then behavioral mental health would be roughly 75%, so 76, something like that.
So yes, I mean,
You can't have-
there is some duplicate. I mean, there's obviously, somebody may have it both a primary and a secondary disability in the same So maybe someone experiences anxiety and depression, for instance, that may be
I see.
primary and secondary of the same, so it's a
But
bit of a.
either way, you
Yeah.
can see that dual diagnosis is very, very heavily represented.
I think that's probably a fair statement, yes, yes.
And
Mhm.
that was kind of similar to mine, is how was it differentiated between primary and secondary? To be able to say this one is, was it based on this one is impacting barriers to employment the most? Or this one is what the person identified as their primary?
It is the individual's identity, yes, the individual's experience, yes. Yep. Okay. Next slide.
Why that's not, sorry a second.
Is
it delayed? Yeah, just a.
Okay, looking a little bit more at, again, the needs assessment introduced this term supermajority, which I thought was kind of fun. So those with the most significant disability. So for those not as familiar with the vocational rehabilitation system, when someone is determined eligible for the program, and that is based on federal eligibility criteria, we also take another layer, probably not too dissimilar from the BDS system, right? Where we're looking at the level of severity, and there are 3 different levels: those with the most significant disability, those with a significant disability, and then all other or a less significant or not as significant disability. So again, as we said, almost 80% are folks determined to be somebody with the most significant disability. Looking at just that population, among participants with closed cases across, so everybody across the 3 different disability categories, those with the most significant disability actually had a little bit of a higher rate of exit with employment than the other 2 categories. However, on the flip side, had lower average wages and weekly hours worked than the other 2 disability priority categories. Individuals who, again, were determined to be those with the most significant disability, so that first priority category to be served, on average, they were in the system of just over 1,000 days from eligibility through exit. And this breaks down in the needs assessment. You can see the numbers in terms of what was the average for those leaving with employment versus the average for those leaving without employment, which is here, and the needs assessment has an average of those 2 days. So a little over 1,000 for those exiting with employment, and then just under 800 for those exiting for other reasons. And people leave the system for a lot of different reasons. Of course, the reason we want is that they're leaving because they achieved their goal, they've obtained employment, they're stable, and they no longer need services. But as I said, people leave for a lot of other reasons. Sometimes they're exiting from a wait list. They know, when we reached out to them, they no longer wanted or needed services before they even got services. They may be exiting from application before eligibility. They may be exiting after eligibility before they get to a service plan, or exiting after they get to a service plan. They may leave because they move and want to connect with services in another state. They may be hospitalized or have medical issues, or we may just not be able to find them. They may have, we can't reach them, after multiple attempts and aren't getting responses, and they exit for those reasons. Next one. These are the primary recommendations, or the 6 recommendations that resulted. And again, this is a very high level summary. I wanted to make sure we had lots of time for discussion. So when the needs assessment is posted, I'm sure we can share a link and you can read at your leisure. But we did a lot of different surveys with different groups, looked at a lot of data, actually worked with a contractor, PCG, Public Consulting Group, who developed the needs assessment, did the data analysis, did the survey analysis, conducted the survey. So it was more of a neutral process. And these were the resulting recommendations. So I'm going to go through them really quickly on this slide, and then we'll kind of get into each one. And that's where I'm going to stop talking a bit and see if we can have some dialogue, some suggestions on how we might move forward, or what might be some specific strategies we could consider as we work toward implementing some of these recommendations. So the top one there is improve services for target populations, including those with mental health conditions. Second is review processes to maximize efficiency. So this really circles back on the feedback around, can we make things a bit less complex, right? Can they be simpler? Can we do things faster? Third is improve the transition process for students entering VR services. Try as we might, there's still much area for improvement there as those students, those young folks transition away from school and into employment. And we still seem to be losing a lot of those folks as they come to VR. So trying to figure out, where is that gap? How do we make that transition a bit more smooth? And how do we better leverage the work that's already been done through transition and pre-ed, so we're not duplicating and maybe repeating some of that when they hit our door in VR. Expanding access to post-secondary education and training. This has been a goal that we've had now for a couple of years, is to support the enrollment of more VR participants in post-secondary training, and really wanting to emphasize, or at least give equal emphasis to all of the different short-term credential-bearing post-secondary opportunities that are out there, which are often underutilized or overlooked, but can be a very direct path into employment for folks. Help employers create opportunities, finding more opportunities to create work experiences, connect employers to resources so they can better support and accommodate individuals with disabilities that they are hiring. And then considering establishment projects to improve capacity of our current providers. Okay, so diving into that first recommendation a little bit, again, improving services for targeted populations, specifically noting those with mental health conditions. There were a few proposed strategies that PCG put forth in the reports. One of those is to continue to strengthen partnerships and coordination with organizations that also serve or specialize in serving this targeted population. Building on existing practices to increase capacity of current providers, build on some successes that we've had, and then making sure success stories are representative of the full population that is receiving VR services. I'll pause there and open up for any comments, any suggestions, thoughts, ideas.
Teresa, on since this is related to or including individuals with mental health conditions, is there any conversation with CMHCs about employment?
Yeah. Yes, we've had a pretty good partnership with the Division of Mental Health and Addiction here for, probably like 5 or 6 years. And we're actually doing a small little shared funding project right now where we have a couple of dedicated staff. The MHA is providing our 21.3% state match, so we can draw a little bit more of our federal dollars. And they are working with 4 pilot mental health centers on, some of you might be familiar with individual placement and support, or IPS. It's an evidence-based employment model for primarily individuals with mental health conditions. So we have 4, there's 24 community mental health centers in Indiana. 4 of those are, and a couple of them piloting now for 2 or 3 years. 2 of them are a bit newer to the IPS model. So that's been going fairly well. It's a challenge in terms of many things. One is, I think, capacity within CMHC staffing. It's been difficult for community mental health centers to, I think, dedicate energy and resources to an employment program when there's such a shortage for treatment and, clinical services. I think that's been probably the biggest challenge. Even the pilot sites that we've had have experienced a lot of turnover and a lot of stops and restarts with these IPS pilot programs. But we can talk more. I mean, we can go into more detail on that. Those are just a couple quick key points there. Yeah.
So when you're talking about the services for targeted populations, one thing that it looks like from the data is really, it's not just one disability, it's the dual diagnosis or multiple diagnoses, which can have different evidence-based practices based on, people don't have just one thing.
Right.
So making sure that concept is being taken into consideration.
The dual diagnosis piece, right. Yeah. Yes, we also have around 9 of the 24 community mental health centers are currently VR employment service providers. We are trying to continue to outreach and share the different enhancements to our systems, to our pay structure, to see if we can, incent more of those those community mental health centers to come back and be VR employment service providers. But it's just I think it's just continues to be a challenging time for mental health centers.
And that leads me to, sorry if that leads me to, I think that challenge isn't gonna go away.
Right. Right.
Which
exactly.
require, and because it's always been a challenge, so it's not gonna somehow resolve itself.
Yeah.
At least not at a sufficient level. I do wonder if, you know, we're talking about a group of people in the VR system that are seeking jobs. And I know there are probably a large group of people seeking jobs that might want and have skills to operate in this space. And I wonder what we're doing to build peer supports in this space, because if we keep going back and relying on the same systems that are at capacity and unable to deliver the services, and we keep trying to build their capacity to do it, it's great, but we're gonna keep, the bottleneck isn't necessarily the capacity or the ability, the skills that they have, though that is one. The bottleneck is the human resources in these spaces. And I wonder if there's just, if we just start, if we have access, there are people looking for jobs in the VR system and well beyond that. Maybe there's a space in there that we could just be thinking differently. I don't know what that is, but I mean, I think of places like Self Advocates of Indiana. I think of different mental health associations that could serve as a key kind of player in between that mental health center that will always be bottlenecked, or in a lot of cases, a lot of our typical VR services, and nothing. There has to be something in between, I think. And I do feel like we have a community of leaders, of people with disabilities who could really serve that role. That's where I feel like if we're going to build capacity, we should build capacity in all of these. It's not a one or any one of these places. But I think that's a place where we could really use some bolstering and support in our community. Because I don't know if the solution, I think the solution can't be one or the other. I think it has to be an all. And I think it's an area where we in Indiana and virtually every state hasn't really looked really hard at and saying, how do we actually increase the numbers of humans that can do this kind of work? We don't need everyone to have every skill set or every possible way to get somebody a job. But there's probably quite a bit of work that can be done prior to needing every VR rehab, kind of technical skill. So anyway, I don't know where that goes. It's just a thought that I feel like we're not, it's just an idea.
I'm Tali, by the way,
Mhm.
and I do have an intellectual disability and mental health conditions too. But I was working at a daycare and they didn't see anything wrong with me, but when I went to work, my mind, when you have mental health issues, it plays tricks on you. So my day was kind of rough, but I was doing okay. And then when I was with a kid, it was like a 1-year-old, but you got to be careful with them because, I didn't really know that I did this, but another mother saw me do something and they directly told them to let me go because they didn't think I seemed fit to work into a daycare system with not knowing my story.
Sure.
And it's just, I have a job coach who's through VR. Name's Julie Sewell. She works with Shares Incorporated. And it's just, I'm jobless right now, but I'm also on the Self Advocates of Indiana for my, for LEL Home Services. So it's just, it is hard because I do own my own place, but it is tricky to, have that type of money to do the fun things I want to do, but it's not like I like asking for money. I talked to Steve Boyer, is it? Sean, so on, Monday, and I told him like my situation and, cause I did apply to be on the Arc of Indiana. But I didn't get the position, but they said I could still come to like whatever it's called, the meetings in May, June, and July. And if I get to be picked as a mentor, then they'll pay me the money back that they'll pay me $100 for May, June, and for June, July, and August, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to like go to a job, and I enjoyed working, but it's like when you're there, you have to be in a positive mind.
Mhm.
But my mind likes to turn things into a negative. So when I used to work at McDonald's, I loved it. I worked there for 7 years. Then I went to TJ Maxx for 5, and then I was at Kid City USA for like 3 or 4 months, and then they had to let me go because of that incident. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Can I ask you a follow-up question?
Yeah.
So if you were to give advice to a job coach or a VR counselor, what do you think is the most helpful in terms of supporting you to be successful working?
I would say like, just be there to support me. Julie comes in and checks on me every so often. But since I didn't want to look for another job lately because it just crushed my dreams. So I just was like, I'll go to another position of somewhere else, like, that I don't want to be in, but
Okay.
I just feel like if I could tell the VR counselor or
Yeah.
my, job coach, I would tell him, try to get me into a job that I would love and enjoy and want to be there every day to help others. Like I really want to be on the Arc of Indiana because I feel like, a lot of people don't understand me and they don't get where I come from. Because I do have a strict mother who cares and loves and wants to nurture me, but sometimes I don't see that. And it's like, come on, Mom, just let me grow up, But she just is like, no, I want to be there to be your support and protect you. And it's hard.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way.
So I think I heard a couple things. You liked to work. You felt better when you were working. Did I hear, did I kind of get that? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. And finding the right job
right.
were really important. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Do you think, as I had a similar question to Lee, do you think, what could the job coach or anyone, I think, have done to maybe, would there been things you would have wanted the employer to know about you? I mean, not to share your personal, but or maybe have been able to navigate that so that they could have addressed it? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I wanted them to like, they knew I have a disability and stuff, but it's like they don't know I wouldn't be able to come into work and
Like if
tell
you needed
them.
a break, maybe, or like if you, I don't know if you, but if you would have been able to say, hey, I just need a break for a second or something, can someone, if that sort of conversation, if you would have wanted, and I don't know that you did, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but support, to maybe have had that conversation with your employer,
Right,
that would-
yeah,
or
that
whatever
might
would have
have.
helped you,
Well, the thing is like, the kids like to take books from other kids. And I moved the kid a little too forcefully around me. So, and then I picked him up. Crazy me, I meant to pick him up with like this, but I tried to pick him up by one arm.
Okay.
And the mother saw that and directly wanted them to get rid of me. They were trying to not get rid of me. They were trying to try other things that I could be in, like cleaning or be in the
It sounds like you
kitchen.
want to work with kids. I mean, is that part of it too, or do you like?
I mean, I love working with kids.
Oh,
It's just, when I look back, I'm like, it was hard because I had to get up early and.
Well, and I think that's what's great about having different jobs, right? I mean, it's figuring out what you want to do and maybe what fits and what doesn't.
And I
For
am
anyone,
going
right?
to school to get my GED right now, so through C9, so.
Good for you.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that.
Does anyone else have questions? for me?
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm joking.
Other thoughts? This is a tough area. This is I mean, obviously it's a challenging area because we haven't figured it, right? We have not figured it out. Like Derek said, this is not, there's no quick overnight fix here. The capacity issues are not going away. Thoughts on, to piggyback off of the suggestion around how do we expand the capacity, thinking of maybe approaches like a peer supports. And if you're familiar with mental health services in Indiana, there are peer recovery specialists. So it's not a, it's not an unknown concept necessarily. I think there's less focus around the utilization of peers or incorporation of peers for purposes of employment specifically. And I would agree that that's where I feel like we can make some traction. We're doing, again, some piloting of peer support specialists with, I've talked about our Support Employment Plus project here before. That's really focused on helping folks in sub-minimum wage employment or thinking about those settings to transition to competitive integrated employment settings. And we have 5 pilot sites, different pilots than what I mentioned before. And they all have peer specialists that we've been able to train and support through the Support Employment Plus federal grant that we have. So I think we can learn from that. It's fairly new. We've been doing it for, I don't know, year and a half. Anybody here? No, I don't think there's anyone here. That's one of our pilot sites today. So we definitely could learn from that and see how we might grow that.
How rigid are the funds, the VR funds? I mean, are there some options or opportunities for you all to think about, again, kind of atypical service providers? I'm just thinking of, a family member who's not isn't running a vocational program. Is there some flexibility to think differently about how some of those funds can be maybe optimized for use?
Yeah, I think there's always the opportunity, in terms of employment services in particular, there are some accreditation
Yeah.
currently in current statute, there are some accreditation requirements. That would be maybe the one more rigid components. But there's probably creative ways to structure services.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if if there's a way to link current providers of the service to CMHCs in their areas, like if you've got a ARC who's doing something and they've got a bow and health center in their market, if there's a way to link the 2 communities together, and that way you've got somebody who already knows how to do the VR system, how to bill, how to have their accreditation and all that, and maybe link them together a little bit better or differently.
Yeah. Thank you.
As far as the mental health side, looking at clubhouses.
We've spoken with a couple clubhouses.
Clubhouses?
Yeah, we've spoken with a couple and toured a couple. We brought
What
a
is that?
couple. Yeah, do you want?
Yeah, so clubhouses are peer-led, peer-organized organizations for folks typically with serious mental illness conditions. And it's supposed to be kind of a peer support model, but I don't know quite how to describe it. People can come and talk to other folks, they can come and get help with things, they can come and just hang out. It's supposed to be kind of a community building thing. There's an accreditation process that happens for clubhouses that want to follow the Carriage House
Yeah.
model.
But how many in Indiana are there?
A dozen or so, I think.
How many?
Around a dozen, I want to say. Yeah, we actually brought a couple in as vendors a few years, right before COVID.
Yeah.
And a lot of those clubhouses kind of closed for a bit of time. The one in Indy has not reopened. I don't.
Oh, really?
I think they tried. Yeah, we just visited with them recently. what I really appreciate as the VR director about clubhouses is that they're actually pretty philosophically aligned around, they're already bought in that employment is important to recovery. They support employment and through a couple different approaches, a couple different models, and they really evolved over the years. I think many, many years ago, they were doing mostly what would not necessarily fit that competitive integrated employment definition today, but they've evolved and are, are doing much more of that. So we'd be very interested in clubhouses serving as providers. That we've kind of thought we had some traction there a few years ago, and then it kind of fizzled out.
And it's been a while, but I know it kind of piggybacks off of that. And again, I think the VR dollars and kind of how they can be used might be a bit of a challenge at times, related to whether this can happen, but just even finding these kind of less formal systems of support. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call that it's kind of a semi-formal, but it's one led by that group rather than by these broader systems. But we had some success, in Minnesota. We had a pilot in Kentucky and in Tennessee, related to just leveraging kind of faith communities. And of course, not all faith communities are, all into this, but those that view this as a core piece of the challenges that their parishioners face, including those with disabilities, it was an opportunity for people with disabilities and mental health conditions and even intellectual disabilities to use this informal network that, again, it was not the rigid VR kind of rehab model, but it was how do you build their capacity to support people with differing abilities in there, to find the kind of life outcomes that they need, and employment was the focus. So I think those are the kinds of opportunities. That's kind of when you think about target populations and services, it's a bit more amorphous. It's hard to get your arms around, but I think the opportunities there are real in this state. And I think the needs are high enough where maybe it's time to be kind of creative and find ways to support some of those too.
Thoughts? No, that's okay.
Okay, I didn't know if someone was
move
moving. Okay,
if you
sorry.
want to move, and we don't necessarily need to go through all of these. If there are certain recommendations the group is, more or less interested in covering, I'm happy to jump around. Do we want to pause here to think about efficiencies and reducing burden? Seems to be a pretty hot topic. Yeah.
A lot of the folks that we work with, they are eligible for the impact program as well.
Okay.
Is there any kind
Or are you
of,
gonna say what that is too?
it's
It's me that I probably don't know.
it's a program that helps with work support
Okay.
and the way that you're eligible.
Is it like
for
a grant or is it?
It's through the SNAP system.
Oh, okay.
But there's not a lot of coordination between VR and that, and I'm just
Right.
wondering if there's any way to
That's
maximize
good.
that as well.
That's a good thought. We used to get many years ago, when I was many years ago
I
now,
remember that.
we used to get quite a few
Boy, how it's
referrals
changed, right?
from them.
Way back.
Yeah,
There's services on there like childcare and
Yeah.
uniforms
Yes.
and stuff like that.
leveraging
you
more
know,
of that.
VR doesn't
Yeah,
really have, and it'd be nice to supplement that with that.
yeah, and we do provide those things, but we always like to try to tap into comparable benefits where we can. No, thank you, got that
Is
down.
there a payer, I guess, that is the primary and secondary compared on that?
It's fuzzy.
Because I know waiver's the payer of last.
Nobody
resort, but I
wants to be
didn't
the
know
first
if that
payer,
was-
yeah.
yes, Okay.
There are certain kinds of services we are required to do to review comparable benefits, and then there are some services where we're not, we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to just go through, but even with all of that, if accessing a comparable benefit is going to delay services, then we kind of default to that first payer. So it's a little complicated, yeah. I think that's a great idea.
Do you want us Move to the next one.
Do you, yeah,
I don't wanna
unless,
rush it.
unless
I'm
there's
just looking at
ideas.
you for-
I mean, I've looked at these 89 times, so I'm always ready to move on. If there's other ideas on maximizing efficiencies, this kind of goes back to capacity, right? Definitely layered with capacity. If we don't have the manpower, how do we do a better job? Be more efficient, the smarter, working smarter, not harder approach is very, very needed. Yeah.
And that relates to one of the problems identified, which was complexity in the system.
Yeah.
So the efficiencies make sense. What I'm curious, just going back and, I know this isn't the right exact slide, because it's not enumerating all of the recommendations. But when the highest problem identified was transportation
Mhm.
and loss of benefits, but that's not at all reflected in any of the recommendations. I'm not sure if there's a disconnect
Sure.
or if I'm just misunderstanding something, because I would have expected that to be one of the recommendations to address the transportation issue.
Yeah.
Address loss of benefits.
Yeah, well, I think we're looking at recommendations that, not that we can't impact those things, but that the VR program particularly can tackle. Again, not that we can't support systemic or statewide or system-wide kinds of things, but I think those are a bit less maybe tangible in terms of what what we can make a dent in or make an impact in. We are definitely already supporting transportation in a variety of ways for individuals. I think a lot of the transportation barriers, I think there's perceived and there's real barriers. There's some real barriers and there's some perceived barriers. And again, we can get into more detail on it, or we can talk about transportation if folks have new ideas, new thoughts to share. But it is that I think that might be why. But that's some good feedback too. We could take a fresh look at these and see if we can specifically call that out and where that might fit in terms of what VR could impact there. If that makes sense.
I don't know if this is a question or around maximizing efficiencies, but when people go to sign up for a waiver and are told that they're going to go on a waiting list, or they refer to VR?
What kind of a waiver waiting list? So I don't know. Do you know how you
I
want
can
to
speak
that?
to that. We do try, as particularly, we always try to connect people to other resources, but particularly if there's gonna be placement on a wait list, we do talk with them about those other options. Yes, absolutely.
Teresa, can you clarify that one of the barriers is the loss of benefits? Is that the perceived loss of benefits if they get employment, or that they are actually losing benefits?
Probably both. I don't know that the data gets, answers that specifically, but it's probably a bit of both. Yeah.
So why do you think that is, Teresa? I mean, why do you think that there is, if it's not actually, you're not, if working does not actually lead to loss of benefits, why is there a perception that could happen?
I think we've scared people as a system a little bit. I think we've scared people, and I think, people have heard about their cousins, brother-in-laws, aunt who had a really bad situation happen, right? Because SSA makes mistakes sometimes, right? With benefits, Medicaid, there's mistakes sometimes, and people have maybe unintentionally lost their benefits or had a difficult time having them re-engaged. And so I think there are enough of those. There are enough of those experiences shared, and systemically, I think as a system, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard sitting in a conference of something, a job coach or a counselor or a parent will say, oh, you can't work more than 20 hours and keep your benefits. That's not a thing. Like, that's not a thing. But it's become a thing, right? It's become
I think systemically, when the
fake
first thing we
fact.
talk about is, let's talk about how you can keep your benefits.
That's the first
And
conversation.
not how you can,
Yeah.
be successfully employed and, those things. We do frighten people, so.
We do
The
frighten
focus is
people.
wrong.
We do frighten people. We counsel them while there is access to counseling on benefits and employment and that impact. We, as a system, we tend to counsel people to only work to a certain level, to not negatively impact.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
how can work help you maximize your earnings? And then maybe there's still a safety net here if something happens, because things happen, right? We are doing some dedicated work on this again with the SE Plus dollars that we have. You'll see a little bit of an intro video today, but we made a couple other videos that try to target some of those big myths. They're like 4 or 5 minute videos. And we are planning to embark on some financial planning re-messaging. So we talk about benefits counseling a lot. I think it's just a renaming, re-messaging. It's really about financial planning. And really trying to shift that message. It's not going to be easy, right? But we'll be reaching out to you guys in particular, right? As we want to develop this new message, how do we all infiltrate it in our own spaces so that over time we can change this message?
Well, I think that would be incredibly helpful, because like I said, I literally heard it yesterday.
What, the 20-hour thing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the 20-hour thing.
Yeah.
Literally yesterday. And so it will be very helpful to have
Yeah.
a way to rebut that. and
Yeah.
say, well, wait a minute,
Yeah.
let's look at
Yeah.
this.
Maybe we can share all 4 of those videos, just send it out, an email.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I don't know if you get Will Coltrion as our project manager for the SE Plus project. Will's a CWIC, Community Work Center coordinator in a former life. So he brings a lot of that benefits counseling knowledge into his role with this project, transitioning folks from, sub-minimum to competitive integrated employment. And he was our host for 4 videos. And you'll see some of that very quick mythbuster information and kind of moving toward this message. A lot of work to do there, but I'm excited about what I think we can accomplish here, at least getting good messaging so we can reach out to NRF, reach out to ARC, reach out to IDR, reach out to different partners, reach out to case management companies and say, as you train and onboard or educate your members, please use this message. Please use this message.
The hardest part will be changing the minds of parents.
Yes, you're right. You're right. It will take some years probably, but we got to start somewhere. We got to start it. Yeah, we'll be reaching out to you too.
I'll talk to parents.
To that end, when folks do have some kind of work history and they are eligible for Medicare on top of the Medicaid, is there any kind of help to get them signed up for that? Because there's a lot more bin counseling options that are available to them.
We can provide resources. I don't know that VR specifically helps people acquire benefits. We can educate about those, and then we will refer folks for one-on-one. It's currently called benefits counseling, and they can help, kind of direct them on those paths.
Can you just share that second bullet, the consistency of
Yeah.
policy interpretation across
Yeah,
offices?
yeah.
Can you just give me a concrete
Yeah,
example? of,
sure.
like, one of the
So, yes, I think in VR, because of the large sort of scope and breadth of services that we provide, again, we get back to complexity, but even though we, do our darndest to lay out specific guidance and policies, it's a very gray, there's a lot of gray, and this office might be interpreting or carrying out a practice differently than this office. So maybe this office is requiring a certain form or a certain way that authorizations are requested, where another office wants that to look somewhat differently. We've made some good progress here recently, but my goodness, there's so much,
Yeah.
there's so much more.
I feel like that's an area that I do feel like technology could really, and technology is expensive, I know that, but it seems like it could be ripe for
Yeah.
a technology intervention, because, even you don't want a counselor up in, up north saying, this suite of services are provided, and a counselor down south saying, well, only these are, and they're different. You want them to be able, because the system can deliver service, you can deliver these services. So I think you want consistency. This is about equity, this is about, but it's also about their knowledge and ability to capture stuff. So I feel like the combination of data around service utilization, like what services have been provided or what types of things can be provided, how policies, even simple FAQs that can be used. in these spaces, but then sifted through what we have now, this very powerful technology that can help when somebody has a question or leaders have questions in these field offices to get a better consistent message that is maybe driven by your office. So I do feel like technology is, this is an opportune place. I won't get into
Yep.
details.
Yep.
And I think there's a million potential directions, but I think it could be really helpful. Because what you need to do is provide tools for folks on the ground.
Right.
To be able to run rather than wait to hear from their manager who has to connect with you. You want these consistencies to flow more efficiently, so the services can be delivered, they can deliver more effectively, faster. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think I think that's a great point. And there's always, every year there will be new technology, right, to leverage and support. I think we've made a few strides there, but certainly more opportunity.
Yeah, and I think some can be big bites and expensive. Some can be probably much more affordable as tools of information sharing. I think sometimes the hardest part is having what is the message? And then how does it get distributed to to the people on the ground? And I think that's maybe more, having the message, I think you probably have it.
Yeah.
These services can be delivered. This gray area, there's some guidance on how this gray area can be understood more on your day-to-day practice. And then, but what folks oftentimes don't have is maybe the feeling of empowerment because they are operating in that gray. And this can, you could probably define what that is a little more effectively, or you already do, but it needs to get communicated on that ground and then allow people to run with it. So anyway, I ramble, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I think what we see, it's more kind of practices than it is kind of service access,
Yeah.
service access or limited service access. I think it's just more practice, which is difficult for our vendors and our providers who work across multiple offices, because then they're trying to navigate, practices that don't always look the same.
Yeah, for sure.
Any other thoughts here? If you find some cool technology. It's improving the transition process for students entering VR. So a couple of thoughts here: training and resources to those secondary settings to connect students, not just to VR, but to other workforce programs and maybe sooner. And then expanding engagement with diploma track students. We don't see as many of those students maybe coming our way, which is fine. Maybe they're accessing other resources. And again, it kind of circles back to, we really ought to be educating students with disabilities, not just about VR as a one-stop place, but as the full network of work programs.
Teresa, now that you don't have the vacancies in VR counselors that we had a decade ago.
Yeah.
Are they getting any better at attending any of these transition case conference committees, or at least contacting the school about?
Yeah.
students
Yes.
getting ready?
Yes, I think so. Yes. We revamped, kind of refreshed our expectations around local school collaboration and attendance within the last few years or so. And there's a kind of a uniform process that, that schools have of how they can reach out or how they should reach out to request those, and then targeted folks in the office that, kind of a tiered, if this person's not available, then this person may go. That doesn't mean we can get to all of them necessarily. But I think we have more of a presence at those.
Is
now
it on
than
the
we did.
schools to reach out to the VR counselors and not the VR counselors being able to reach out to the schools?
I think it goes both ways. We ask that counselors reach out, that offices reach out to schools, as we begin each school year, especially if there's a new counselor, but in general, reach out, have those initial conversations, see what's necessary in terms of, any updated kind of VR 101 information or meeting with teachers, or, maybe getting a sense of when or how many students might be coming. But then if schools do want to reach out and request that someone be there for something in particular, we do have a kind of a path that we're asking them to reach out on. So it's both. We should be proactive, but schools can also reach out directly, and we just ask that they're kind of following a certain start here. We're saying start here, start here, and that will get you connected to the right people.
Teresa, I would say that's still an extreme struggle.
It's still
I'm
what?
still in extreme struggle. I attend
Yeah.
lots of case conferences and do not see
Yeah,
well, pre-con folks.
yeah, ever
Like,
or just regular?
Ever.
Okay,
I mean, so, and then I supervise Central Indiana.
yeah,
So I talk, and I
Yeah.
see a lot of IEPs that come across my desk
Yeah.
throughout the state and don't have them listed on the attendees. So I believe
Yeah.
when you say that there has been more discussion, because I've heard the wheels turning about more discussion. I have seen more perhaps outreach discussion, but when it comes to being in the field and attending and looking at IEPs for students in transition or age, I am not seeing them as listed participants or having them attend meetings that I have personally been at or heard the discussion around our staff. So thank you for stepping
Okay.
forward and making that
yeah,
more in front. But I would
Sure.
say it still needs some significant.
Yeah. and we are really prioritizing those, because we can't be at all of them. Like, frankly, we can't even be at half of them, you know, we are really trying to prioritize those juniors and seniors. So I don't know if that makes an impact, but also, and I've said this for many years, it's fine, case conferences are fine to attend, but it's not the only opportunity to get in front of a student. So there may be different, and I'm sure there are still times we just aren't there. I'll own that. But I think there's also times we aren't there, but we might be interacting in a different.
And a
different way.
transition fair
Yeah.
or something, which is
Right.
great. It's just many times families and students really haven't heard about VR. Or they would say, well, we were told that can't happen. And so
No.
then we're like, oh, no, that's not.
No.
And we send the links and we provide the resources.
Yeah.
But so thank you for moving forward.
Yes, and oftentimes the pre-ets team there
Yes.
working at the school can help. Oftentimes they're making that connection. Or they should be making that
Well,
connection, yeah.
yeah.
But again, we're also asking that they make it the connection to workforce programs in general, because we are, I'll be honest with you too, we are at capacity.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's all part of.
Yes,
What I think when we look at employment for individuals with disabilities in Indiana.
Yeah.
And we see the number we have, and even our goal is not too lofty.
yeah,
There's still all of these holes in that, because
Yeah.
for me, part of what I look at is that birth to 26, right, a big age span. But as we look at school and preparing for when the bus stops coming, you have to have been focusing on that for a while. And I just think as we continue to talk more and more,
Yeah.
the gaps that we continue to see over, for me, a 20-year span,
sure,
are still needing some of those exact addressing issues. So thanks.
yeah. The warm handoff needs work.
Yeah.
Right,
It's-
Is there any kind of mentoring program between the schools? Because some schools do it very well
Yeah.
and some, I mean, there's quite the disparity. So is there, I guess, a mentoring program between different school districts or co-ops? Because that would be a good opportunity.
I don't know if others are familiar with that. Not that I'm aware of.
Kyle, do you have any insights from the work that was done as part of the employment transformation? I know there was work with some of the school systems.
Like school to school, yeah. Yeah. Somewhat sparse, yeah.
When I think about this section, that, I mean, there's a lot that this could, but I do think that there's an opportunity to leverage other organizations that are engaging with these groups, and more just when it says to expand engagement with diploma track students, you know, as an example, I think, you know, common communications that can be pushed through, and not that this doesn't happen, but I think common communications that can be pushed through organizations like mine, kind of these secondary and tertiary organizations that aren't necessarily sitting with the students, but are connecting with schools, connecting with teachers, that and have our own connection with families and individuals. You know, we are cheap ways to give packaged communication around VR, for example, and getting that message out at certain points in time. So I think there's partnership opportunities that wouldn't cost. It would just require some content development that could be, you know, by leveraging our networks. So I think that's something we're thinking about. I tend to go to find money, give us money to do stuff, but I don't think it always has to be. And I think that's one of those areas where we have to think about this broader network of people engaging with students, even from a bigger distance, and realize that we too need to keep shoving information in people's faces as well. Just something.
You really
We're-
can't, you can't over
You
communicate
can't.
with schools.
Yeah, and
My
timing
goodness.
matters, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's great to have that communication
Yeah.
when my kid's a sophomore, but I don't need that right now. Oh, shoot, they're at the end of their junior year and I haven't had it.
Right,
I mean, it really is about timing, so you really have to.
right.
So anyway, think of partners like us as
Yeah.
places that can at least get that message out. And if you have messages developed, we can
Right.
get it out there as well.
Well, I'll just share one more thing on this and we can move on, but we are, you know, we've been doing pre-employment transition services for a bit now. And again, for many years, it's been meet this 15% reserve requirement, right? Get the dollars redirected, free it up over here, move it over here, get the students served, right? Get it statewide, get it in every county. And now, fortunately, we're past that. And we can really look at, you know, what value is this bringing and could it bring more value? And I think for sure it could bring more value. We'll be focusing this year on setting an expectation. And I don't, this will be news, setting an expectation that the purpose of pre-ets ought to be to establish a vocational goal. There's some really good stuff happening in pre-ets, but there's also some what I would fondly call maybe sometimes like some busy work. We're doing it because it's easy, right? We're doing this because it's easy. We're popping into this classroom. Teacher loves it because we're coming and taking over the class for an hour, right? Every other week and doing this thing. And some students are checked in and some students are not. So somehow we've got to shift the expectation that every service that is delivered to the students through pre-ets, because we're also having to stretch there, right? We got to serve more students, so there's a little bit less available to each student. We've really got to help students identify what is your vocational path, where are you going to go for that next step? Maybe it's VR, maybe it's applying to college, maybe it's going to work one, you know, maybe it's whatever, not, you know, next level jobs, you know, whatever it is, but really doing purposeful activities that are leading to that identification of a vocational path. And then when they connect with that other program, again, whether that's VR, whether that's, you know, work one, whatever that happens to be, hopefully they're ready to hit the ground running and we're not duplicating and kind of starting from, you know, what do you want to do with your life? Hopefully they kind of have at least established an initial path. And then I think that gives our pre-eds providers better direction and better expectations of what is their role. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward. Expanding access to post-secondary education and training. So you'll see some bullets here outlining some potential strategies around improving collaboration with post-secondary institutions. We've already got a head start with that. We have some VR staff spending regular time at around 10 or 12 Ivy Techs now around the state, and then expanding counselor awareness of short-term post-secondary credential attainment. You know, oftentimes we still get that student come in on, I'm going to get that bachelor's degree in history or philosophy, and those don't always present people with as direct of a path to employment as maybe some of these shorter-term post-secondary credential attainment opportunities. We are largely underutilizing apprenticeship opportunities. We are really missing that opportunity. So that is a big goal that we've had. Really happy to see that it made its way into the needs assessment, increasing awareness, increasing focus on the full range of post-secondary training opportunities, not just kind of leaping to that degree seeking program. And I think in a governor's workforce cabinet meeting not too long ago, last year, Secretary Jenner stated shared a statistic that 58% of openings, of projected openings in the coming, I don't remember now if it's 5 years, 10 years, 58% of those require a short-term post-secondary credential, not a 2 or 4 year degree. So I think we're really underutilizing that path for all Hoosiers, certainly those coming into the VR system.
Teresa, one of the things we're seeing just with EGTI is there seems to be some VR counselors with very strong judgments about the vocation that people wanting to go to. So even just with our program at Riley, we have one person here in Marion County who did not approve 5 people because they did not think that they would be good at those jobs.
Okay.
And that's not the first time. I mean, there's probably been 24 of students that have not gone to EGTI either in Muncie or here at Riley because of a person's judgment. On
What's
those.
EGTI?
EGTI is the Erskine Green Training Institute. It's a vocational training program in Muncie for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Actually, that's not true. For people with disabilities, all disabilities.
So is it contingent upon the vocational rehab person agreeing with what someone wants to do with the disability for them to be able to match up?
They don't have to have VR training, or they don't have to have VR funding in order to attend, but many do, and many need
They
it.
need it,
Mhm.
and so the VR person doesn't agree with their
It's
choice.
keeps it from them. Yeah, like there was one who they wanted to be a dishwasher. They took a great deal of pride of seeing, of just that sensory of cleaning something, right, and seeing a job be done from start to finish.
Right.
And the VR counselor didn't think that was a job
A good
was-
fit.
There's so many scenarios like that.
Yeah.
So is that acceptable?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know the circumstances, I think that's what we're talking about, a counselor. I think a challenge that we have, again, as we try to stretch our resources is there's all of these training programs that have surfaced and many of them aren't resulting in a specific, industry recognized credential. And, if we go back to the place, train approach, we know a good practice is if someone wants this employment opportunity that, may be more entry level or may not require a specific credential. Finding someone employment, and maybe that means we need to help them get a foot in the door through, work experience, something along those lines, and then training them in that job. And I think that's a little different than the example here, but I think that is where our counselors continue to struggle with some of these training opportunities. There's janitorial, for instance, is that many individuals will not need a training to go into those kind of jobs. And so it's sort of this balance of determining, with our least cost principles, what can we do? Again, we have to spread our resources. With this particular situation, it sounds like, counselors making a determination that the individual disagrees with. If someone does not agree with a determination, they have processes. Yeah, they have appeal rights. Yeah, and you'll have that. I mean, you'll have, we'll have a counselor that we may need, and if we know who that is, we can definitely check in and see, because it sounds like there's a pattern there, see what the situation is and what's happening.
I can say it should be the person with disability that wants to try it and make the mistake that they can't do it. So instead of the VR counselor saying that.
Yeah, well, it's a team approach. It's a team approach.
Yeah, an opportunity here and
Oh, sorry, Teresa, I just moved.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
I was more doing it for time. You're fine. I didn't want to,
Yeah.
we only have about 10
Watching
minutes
time.
at a time, but
No,
if it's quick.
well, I was just gonna say, I think in the post-secondary, in the event you're not agreeing, maybe, the emergence, and really what I think with like Ivy Tech really fighting into it too, micro credentials that are starting to be,
Yeah.
connected to actual
Yeah.
jobs in the workforce.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think if that's not
Yeah.
integrated within there.
Yeah, micro-credentialing, yeah.
Because it is an area that is growing, it's an area that's being recognized, and it's an area that is being aligned with workforce needs in different communities.
Yeah.
And Ivy Tech starting to buy into it, which I think is,
They are.
we're lucky to have Ivy Tech because
Yeah.
they'll start going home.
They've been
Yeah,
very excited to have VR staff
yeah.
on site, and we're benefiting as well. We're learning so much that we didn't know that Ivy Tech offers. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Ivy Cares program, for example. So there's a lot of collaboration opportunity there.
Just a follow-up
Yeah.
question, in the scenario that was provided, the instance,
Yeah.
is this the matter where you're saying that VR counselor is disagreeing with the individual's employment goal, career goal that they want to work in the field of dishwashing? Or is it the methodology to get it, like
Yeah,
the path, with the path?
right.
They telling them you can't pursue that goal, or is it just the way to get there, the path to get there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think, to me, that there
Yeah,
are two
there's a
things there that I would
difference.
want to.
Right. Yeah.
In
we'd be
that
happy to
scenario, it
hear
was a little
that.
bit of both.
Yeah,
One, they really didn't think that dishwashing should be a career. And then it was also that E EGTI was too expensive to teach you how to wash dishes. So a clear understanding of what E EGTI truly is
mhm.
and a judgment of a dishwasher should not
Yeah.
be. a
Yeah.
career.
And there's other I think training is always useful, but there's also ways to help someone obtain, find a path to obtain that outcome, that dishwasher outcome. Yeah.
'Cause I was gonna go pretty fast. 'cause
Yeah,
Chris-
just.
Well, if
quickly,
you wanna touch on
helping
the
employers
last
create
two.
opportunities, I think,
We can always talk about these.
we're underutilizing work-based learning. I think there's more opportunity for that place train, let's figure out how to get someone, maybe it's even starting with an internship or work experience that hopefully leads to hire and, train them in that setting. And then assessing employer needs. And then the last one here is which is good. It's aligned with what we're doing, opportunities to build capacity of current providers through those establishment projects. And in particular for Indiana, I think reducing waiting times for services, increasing capacity to serve participants, and then improving the outcomes. And that kind of leads to quickly, if you want to go to the next slide, quickly updates here. We conducted a request for funding last year and awarded 18 providers, establishment projects. Gosh, there's so much. What do I want to share here quickly? Again, improving capacity, timeliness, quality, quantity of outcomes. There is a link here that has information on what these are for. In short, the providers involved here will provide the 21.3% required non-federal match. And that will allow us to pull more of our VEER federal formula grant to fund those providers with this growth or this capacity. Ultimately, again, to serve more individuals, serve them more quickly, more timely. Overall, the budget impact here, there's no cost to the state here. There's no direct cost to the state because again, the contractors, the providers are bringing their own non-federal match, and then we're pulling federal dollars that we otherwise would be not able to match and returning. So over the 4-year project, we'll be able to keep in Indiana about another $1.5 million in federal funds. And then finally, get one more quick slide. Again, piggybacking on some of the recommendations around simplifying, streamlining. We just rolled out some streamlining with our employment service providers last month. There is a link here for some check and connect sessions coming up in June that folks can register for. Worked closely with the VR Employment Advisory Group on simplifying documentation. We eliminated a lot of documents and streamlined some others. We did joint training in March to both provider and VR staff. Hopefully this will reduce some burden, spend less time on paperwork, and the paperwork I think is a bit easier than maybe it was before. With this, we also did a bit of a reset to try to get to some of that more consistency, support some of the things that we're learning in terms of things taking a long time, trying to move people through discovery, through that career exploration phase much more quickly so we can get to placement more quickly, and meet their needs as well as better aligned with the realities of the capacity and the resources that are available with, again, ultimate goal of improving outcomes. I think that's all I had.
Did it.
Did we do it?
We did it. Yeah, we're gonna take a quick break.
did.
We're like 5 minutes, so
10:55,
if you guys can
5
come back at 11, you don't have to eat, but you need to take a break. 11:10, so just like if you need water, break, email. Whatever we need to do.
Yeah, I'm stretched. So warm up. I had to put my sweater on. Now it's freezing.
It's just my head.
When I left the
No,
office,
it's
my
my
office
hands.
upstairs,
Like, I'm
I'm gonna
literally-
grab my sweater.
Does. I mean, my hand, I mean, I think I have an issue. I have some sort of certification.
Oh, no, it's starting to.
Right. Hey, where did you get, hey, and then, no, it's fine. Where did your kids go to target? North or south? Oh, we were at North. We were at North this weekend for baseball. Yeah. My son had baseball, yeah. Yeah. I'd never been there. It's so funny, like, I know South.
Yeah,
so. And so I was driving there, I was like, I don't think I even knew this was here. Like, I knew North existed, but I don't think I knew where it was. Are you serious?
He's still like,
Oh, wow.
Well, my son's on JV, but yeah. Wait, he's still a coach? I mean, what are you, Jen, like 7? He's like,
Oh, gosh. Well, you just, there you go, endear yourself.
I think we're
I'm
still,
here.
the braces
Yeah.
ourselves.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
very
very
excited.
excited. Essentially.
I have
eligibility
that have my
kids.
well,
Yeah.
it's,
Okay, so they're planning somewhat around. I'm curious, what's just thinking about. That's what. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, our eligibility is someone has to put a quarter month old impairment. The impairment causes barriers.
is that, so wait, is that when they split it up? Is that when they split?
They.
Or, sorry, you know what I mean? And they like,
So let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
oh, the split, was it, where was it, what was it called? Which one is nicer in terms of facility? Is there either, I mean, the baseball stuff was really, they had a field of sites. I mean, it's really nice. I was surprised, like, we just got a turf, I work here, obviously.
Well, and we
And they just spin, I mean, they just spend money, we have a turf field, which,
for people.
I mean, Peter's on JV, so they don't get to play on it, but yeah, either way. But I mean, you know, because, you know, and then we move the game sometimes because of, you know, the field.
Yeah.
It's great. I mean, multiple games they beat. I mean,
Yeah.
but I just didn't know. It was just funny. I was like, I've lived, I mean, I went to Bloomington, I know, Bloomington, and I was just like, driving and I'm like I knew this, I mean, I knew it existed. I just, where does or like richer, because I'm sure there's some probably not really. Like, where's all the kids that are like,
I would say, we don't really.
that's what
I don't. We serve about,
Yeah.
well, over that 3 year.
Having that right, right.
You know, they're about. I know, I'm also like in our doors.
I mean, like, I mean, I was like, I mean, it takes me, if it cuts off, we live pretty, we live. It's still 20-minute difference.
I think.
Yes,
Except that one we like
I
start.
mean, about, except about.
Like I was like, 'cause I was early with the game, so it's like I'm gonna pull over, get started. It's like, oh yeah, like you have to get off and it's like. I think our son's gonna have to put his camera, and I was like,
So.
are you, do you think that you're? You're right. I was right.
Where you have to like. I'm gonna take your.
I use a good school, but.
Oh,
For
it's
state to send a kid that I paid, you know, is a good school. This isn't.
I would say move.
I mean, like, oh, I think that's. I mean, I'm sorry for not saying that, but like, I mean, I went to Iowa for $10,000, not. Produce 20, whatever. Yeah, but-
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but don't get me started on IU. It's absurd. Well, that's.
Yeah, I'm a little,
Impacting it.
just thinking about like.
Well, I was joking with my husband. Well, I was joking with my husband, and my husband, like, there's stuff, but I don't know. It's on
It's not just. In the end.
Yeah.
And then it's just gonna rouse it.
We don't.
I don't know. I mean, that's the thing is nobody knows. But it seems like. That's a- Yeah. So much.
Well, any success rate, we wish it was our program. That didn't involve it. That's why I'm so.
Yeah.
I think so, because someone with a very, we see people with very. People with mild. And vice versa. So, and I'm very. We tend to tell people.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I asked them, I was like, why couldn't they? Yeah.
I'm worried, I don't think you see what's for that. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm not translating. Yeah.
Yeah. Any.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I gotta.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
We got a whole other, we have to wait for the board. We are board.
Or I mean,
No, I don't know. Oh, yeah.
you know, I don't.
I would think it would be the majority. I would not think it would be that. We see people with very. It might be, it might take trying different things, finding jobs. That is. Yeah, but yeah, it's very. Finding it all about. And then we have.
I know, and that's, I know.
Like I said, we don't check for folks. You get people who have like lost their. The construction, the classroom construction. Maybe folks are jumping, rain. It's important. I don't know.
What do I do? I'll be your big man. Up in front of the camera. We will.
Yeah, so I don't know that anybody probably like to say, because it's very. It's hard. But a figure, but I would tend to think more than not.
I told parents. I told parents, I'm like, oh, we're going to eat tonight. Oh, but they all came over and I was like, you know. Yeah, I did, I made one. You did the wrong thing, so I already know what your boss was like last.
Yeah.
It always, so in my office, that's what it's at. It's like walking. But then it's outside my office.
I know, my office is on.
I've worked sweaters 12 years.
I just thought that. Yeah, I know.
We can get with
Yeah, no, I thought
I
it was.
don't think he's on yet.
That's where we're on, that's fine. But I don't.
I know, I figured it out.
Yeah.
No, I'm kind of. Yeah, because we didn't. Yeah, for sure. I know, but. Well, yeah, let me. By the way. Sounds like you got. He's like, I think I'm not excited. Cause yeah, he just like, but. Hey, Lexi, can you hear us?
Yeah.
I'm gonna. I think.
No, it's good. It's
Oh,
the
really?
making things work.
Hey, Lexi, can I test it to see if you can hear us?
Hi.
Perfect. Okay, we can hear you, okay? We're just taking a break. We haven't started yet.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
Okay, perfect. And you should be able to chat. I don't know that, I'm gonna see the chat. I can try, but I have to run the slides. So if you wanna say something, feel free just to jump in, okay?
Okay, and then just
Okay.
can we touch base after the meeting since I had no voice
Yep.
half of the meeting?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay.
All right, guys, we have about 3 minutes. Thank you so much. Yeah, see, you know.
It's just way too and I kept getting right now, it's how to save money and spread money, and it's a little trick lady to talk about, new initiatives, and it's just.
Yeah, that, I recognize that. I think,
Yeah.
think about if there, and I think some of the ideas funds is really about letting others know what. I think beyond, think about. One of that's. Maybe start piling or thinking different or just envision. Money. I'm sure that. But if that doesn't feel like I think that. And maybe. It's not for the week. It's not really.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You're just sort of like. Everything's. Get those. And how
Right.
I know, I was totally.
I'll give it some thought.
Like, it's not a.
Can you smell it? Right. You're right.
Solved. Sure, let's have you on board. I think where there's some opportunities.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah, I know I can.
This here. Okay, all right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Sorry, guys. Sorry, I had to make a call, professional call. Okay. All right, we're gonna get started with Holly here. To round us out, we also have Lexi on. She was able to join, which is awesome. So hi, Lexi. Hopefully you can see all of us. We might be a little bit far away, but if you have anything, please just jump in because I have trouble sometimes monitoring the chat when I'm trying to do the slides and I'm the only person monitoring it. So just feel free to jump in if you have a question, or even if you want to save it, we'll have some time at the end as well. So
Okay.
Holly, take it away.
All right. Okay, so wanted just to start, we had some questions about the status of waiver amendment. So wanted just to start there with just a reminder of what we have at our federal partners, CMS, that they are currently reviewing. We submitted waiver amendments in February for the health and wellness waiver, the traumatic brain injury waiver, and the pathways for aging waiver, that both the B and the C. The main part of those, or the primary reason for those amendments, was the implementation of the level of care assessment representative, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but those are currently with our partners at CMS. The health and wellness waiver amendment, again, some of the next slide, please. I'm sorry. I should have cued you. Sorry.
No,
about
you're
that.
fine.
I know you're multitasking. The health and wellness waiver amendment includes, again, the piece about the level of care assessment representative vendor, and that implementation that is set to go live July 1. It revised the unduplicated number of participant counts and the corresponding cost neutrality demonstration information. We'll talk some about that as well. Proposing to add a new reserve capacity specifically for individuals in assisted living who become newly Medicaid eligible. And then modifying the level of care reevaluation language to remove references to the what's called the e-screen and reflect the use of the Entri suite of tools. There's no change.
A little bit about what that means.
Yes, I was just getting ready to say, there is no change to nursing facility level of care, which is what is required to access the health and wellness waiver. One of the levels of care required to access the TBI waiver, because there's two different levels of care with that waiver. The e-screen is a tool that Division of Aging used historically for the choice program. So it's irrelevant to the nursing facility level of care. And that is not new. That's just, it just isn't applicable to nursing facility level of care. So the thing I want to stress again is there's no change to the level of care criteria. It's cleaning up that language and then noting the use of the Entri suite of tools. You all may recall, and we've talked about the Entri suite of tools. Entri has a suite of tools that assess individuals with varying skills and abilities. Currently in use is what's called the Entri home care tool, which is used to assess for nursing facility level of care. And as we've talked about before, we are implementing July 1st pediatric tools from that Entri suite of tools, specifically the Entri Peds or pediatric home care tool and the Entri early years tools, which is for 4 and under and 4 and up, or 3 and under and 4 and up. So again, those are just amendments or things that we put in that amendment.
I have a question.
Sure.
So when does the like peds age group end? Because from what I understood, the reason these level of care tools and the use of them is changing is basically because like, yeah, a 2-year-old isn't going to be able to like bathe themselves and they might not be potty trained, but for the longest it's been where a 2-year-old has the same level of care assessment as like a 30-year-old. But what I'm curious about is kind of what that peds age. I get like how the early years one, was kind of gonna help with that, but like the peds age group, I mean, like I'm wondering if it would be better for it to, I don't know, cut off at like 12 or 13 or 15. I don't know if it cuts off at 18, but basically by like, I don't know, 13, 14, 15, you're doing a lot of ADLs that adults do as well. So I'm kind of curious like how that's gonna look.
Yeah, those are great questions, Lexi, and you're right. Historically, we have assessed children using the Entry home care tool that's being used today that just does not accurately capture the needs and skills of children. Now, the age ranges for those tools, the Entry home peds home care tool and the early years tools, the ages those tools are designed for are the ages we need to use them for so that they're valid. So again, the early years tools is for under 3 and under, and then 4 and up for the pediatric tools. So the pediatric tool goes through, I believe, the age of 18. And then the person would be assessed using the Entry home care tool. So everyone will still be assessed with one tool consistent with their age. Did that help, Lexi?
Yes, it does. But I kind of have a follow-up question. So is that home care peds tool gonna look the same for a 4, 5, 6-year-old as it is for a 16, 17, 18-year-old? Or is it going to is there like a scale for ages within that peds age?
Yeah, those tools for pediatrics are commensurate with the age,
Right.
right? So the tasks are, I'm trying to think of the best way to
Like
explain it.
developmentally appropriate?
Towards the developmental stages of the child, whether that's the early years or the pediatric tools.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
No problem. Good questions. All right, next slide is the traumatic brain injury waiver. Again, you'll see very similar things that we included in that amendment, the LCAR, the language around the level of care and the Entry suite of tools, the cost neutrality demonstration, and then just some technical changes on the language. The pathways waiver, next slide, please. And if someone needs me to slow down, please let me know. I know you all have seen this, but just want to, so if you have questions, I'm happy to stop. Again, implementation of the LCAR, revision of the.
Question. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm reading as you're talking and trying, all my sensories are going.
Sorry.
So the bullet, the revised, the cost neutrality
Yes.
demonstration for the TBI, can you walk through that person?
I can, and I actually have a slide a little bit where we'll talk a little bit about cost neutrality, but when you adjust, so the cost neutrality for those who aren't familiar with it is waivers must show cost neutrality for it's a federal requirement with CMS. What that means is we look at the average cost of individuals on the waiver, and that needs to be within that cost neutrality or that below the cost of institutionalization for those individuals, right? So as we look at, as we make adjustments to these waivers and make amendments to them, we always have to look back at that cost neutrality and update that based on the most recent data. Does that help? Yes?
You said what I understand. I
Okay.
guess I would love to see the math
Okay.
of what you guys are using now as that cost neutrality portion.
Mhm.
Because I think as we talked about it, we looked to what the cost of an institution was when we closed it back in 2009 and then inflation.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that's the same number you guys use, and I don't think it is. So I would love to understand your guys' math, just so as we're talking to legislators, we're talking the same thing at some point.
Okay. Got it. It's a good question. All right. Let's see, did we didn't talk about pathways yet. We did. Okay, so you'll notice here, we also did the revision of the unduplicated participant counts and cost neutrality demonstration. I do want to note with the, can you go back up one?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. With the revisions to the unduplicated number of participant counts, I do want to stress, and I know we've talked about this before as well. Those revisions do not impact people already in services, right? So individuals that were already receiving services, it does not impact them or in any way, shape, or form. We also on the pathways waiver have the proposed new reserve capacity for individuals in assisted living who are newly Medicaid eligible. And you saw that on the health and wellness waiver as well. Next slide, please.
I have a question.
Yes.
So Pathways, it's managed care, Medicaid, and I know a lot of people on Pathways have had a lot of issues with that, and I know there's been kind of some talk up in the air for a while about the beads waivers, being under MCEs. Just wanted to say I really hope that doesn't happen, but I wanted to know if that's something I should be bracing myself for.
Yeah, there are no plans at this time for the family support waiver and the CIH waiver to change from fee for service as they are today, Lexi.
Okay, good. I know there's been some rumors, so I'm glad to get that clarification. Thank you.
It's a rumor. I can confirm that.
Thank you.
And then, good question. Thank you. The Pathways 1915B amendment, there was, again, that amendment simply removes the references to the area agencies on aging conducting the options counseling for that population, and the level of care assessment representative will be doing that for that 60+ population come July. Yes.
Sorry, sorry. Trying to get I heard you say MSW and CIH, no plans to move to managed care. What about H&W?
Oh, not to my knowledge,
Okay.
no.
Just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
yeah.
So, so those are the amendments that are sitting at CMS. They were sent in February. We expect to have them back before July 1. We also submitted waiver renewals in March on the family support waiver, the CIH waiver, and then the associated B4 for the selective contracting of case management. The CIH waiver, just not a lot of changes there. It was a renewal. We updated the reference to the B4, which is the case management. As you recall, when we first did the B4, or this is the first renewal we've had since we implemented the B4 for case management. So there was a lot of language in there about the transition to that new model of case management that we were able to take out because the transition has been made. Again, revising the unduplicated number of participant counts. That does not impact anyone, and there is still space available for new participants. Revise cost neutrality demonstration, and then technical changes again on the language. An example of the technical changes on the language is in the set of amendments we last did. It was the first opportunity we had to signal to CMS that we had a name change from BDDS to BDS. So in the amendments that we are, what I say, living in right now, they all say the Bureau of Disability Services, formerly the Bureau of Developmental Disability Services. So we removed all that now because CMS has seen that in our records in the last set of amendments. So that's one of the examples of those technical changes. The family support renewal, again, not a lot of changes here. Same as the CIH with the referencing the B4, the revision of the unduplicated number of participant counts, reserved waiver capacity counts. I do want to spend a moment on this. We did adjust reserve waiver capacity counts. What that means is, you know, on the family support waiver, we have a number of different reserve capacities, right? People between the ages of 18 to 24, leaving educational services, the child of a veteran or member of the U.S. Armed Forces or National Guard. And then we have a relatively newer reserve capacity for individuals on the health and wellness waiver who lose nursing facility level of care, but meet level of care for the family support waiver. So what we found is that we had on some of those reserve capacities, we were exceeding what we projected in our previous amendment. That's not a big issue if we reserve or if we exceed a waiver capacity on a reserved waiver capacity, as long as we have other slots, right? So it's not, it's okay if we go over a little bit in those reserve capacity, but those would come out of that total slot. So we wanted to make those adjustments. Then we revised the waitlist description. Again, that was kind of some cleanup language, revised the cost neutrality, and then again, made changes to the language, some of the language. And then on the next slide, on the B4 for the case management waiver renewal, I do want to note again, this is for the family support waiver and the CIH waiver only. We revised the name of it. We did have to update, of course, estimated individuals served because we are serving more people than we were the last time when we wrote the B4. We updated caseload values for case managers. And then some of the monitoring methods that we're using to monitor the provision of case management under this contracts. And then updated the waiver cost effectiveness and efficiency projections. That's that waiver cost is reflects what's in the waivers on the FSW and CIH in terms of costs and things. And then again, some updated language. So I do want to note, we did propose increasing from 40 to 42 per case manager in this. Because there are some capacity issues as we continue to put people into the system. We continue to invite 200 people a month to the family support waiver. So there is continued growth there. Yes.
Isn't assisted living an HCBS waiver?
No.
Okay.
So assisted living is a service on the health and wellness and pathways waivers, but it's a waiver service.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
I was just, if it was, I was just curious with the language and how that was played in. But okay.
No, that's a good question. It is a service on some of our waivers. Yeah, but it's not an actual waiver. Any questions, comments? We again expect to hear back in June from CMS on those renewals. Yeah.
So, I know all this stuff has been kind of brewing for a while, like the renewals especially.
Mhm.
I looked at those and obviously it's just kind of mostly just word and stuff, right?
Yes.
With a few small exceptions. But at some point, there's going to be, I believe, some waiver stuff that's happening at the end of this year. And then there's the waiver reset, which is subsequent. Have those timeframes changed at all since last, 2 months ago when we talked?
So what you see on the
Look at the
screen
slide.
there is, yeah, that's okay. But that's all right. No, I think it's good. So there's a lot
Yeah.
happening and that's kind of demonstrated somewhat on this screen, at least as it relates.
It's in the slides too that you have. Jim, if you need.
Yeah. So this does provide some kind of that timeline of those amendments we just talked about, those renewals we just talked about, and you'll notice on the bottom, towards the bottom of the page, an additional timeline for some other waiver amendments. Okay. Last time we met, we talked about a potential November implementation for those amendments. We are now looking at the end, sometime in winter, for implementation of those amendments. We are working on those, but anything we include in those is going to depend on where we are after session in terms of budget legislation that's going through, all those things. So we can't really nail down a whole lot right now. We have a list of things that CMS told us back when we launched Pathways and did all those amendments at the same time. We have a list of things that CMS told us we need to address, right? So we have items we know we need to address in those set of amendments. But until we know a little more,
Is HSRI involved in that?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you give us an idea of what some of those might be?
Sure, some of those are some additional alignment that CMS has requested we do. Specifically, right now, we're running 2 different models of structured family caregiving. One on health and wellness, and I'm not gonna, it's Pathways too, but I'm going to try to focus just on the waivers that we administer. But health and wellness has a model that's slightly different than the model we see on the CIH waiver. So we're going to need to get to some alignment there and have some efforts ready to go to work towards that. But that CMS did say we want to see that, you know, it does, it makes total sense. Another one off the top of my head that we know we need to do, that CMS said we need to do, is the home modification service that we have, right? On the FS and CIH, and then the home mod that we have on the TBI and health and wellness, but all 4 offer that service. In 2024, we added home modification assessment to the FS and the CIH because that was in the health and what was then A&D, the health and wellness and TBI waivers, and we saw value in that, right? Having another party do that assessment, different from the person or the entity that does the modification. Interestingly, CMS said, yeah, we don't like that. Those need to be combined. So we're going to have to combine those. So those are a couple examples, Katie and Jim, of the things that we know we need to do that are sitting kind of in the hopper or in the queue for when we submit the next set of amendments.
So is there anything beyond sort of, I don't know what the right word is, that seems maybe administrative or, you know, those things are kind of just cleaning up language and stuff. Is there anything beyond that that you want to do that is a perceived need change that's
Sure.
more structural and less just administrative?
So there are always things we would like to do. And we have certainly had lots of conversations about some things that we might like to do, but again, until we get through and know what resources we have to work with.
So following up on the structured family caregiving
Yes.
stuff, obviously there was an IPP, there were a couple IPP grants on that, and I know one in particular actually was kind of looking at models across states and everything. And that makes sense, but one of the key issues also, and this applies to other programs too, but I'll just keep it in structured family caregiving, is the rates. Is it safe to say that this year, when you're doing that kind of changing things to get things all correct, that's not going to include rate changes? Or is that not clear?
So I would not be able to commit to any rate changes right now. For this set of amendments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Know that respite is a part of SFC. Is there any, I guess, measures to make sure that that's being provided as it should be?
You know, that's a good question because it is built into that rate. And providers are responsible for that, and that is in the service definition. And it's pretty clear in the service definition how that That where the rubber really meets the road, so.
Yeah.
It's not,
It's not,
yeah.
Have we gotten any complaints about it? I don't.
not
Not
that I'm
that I know.
aware of.
So if anybody isn't getting their respite
Yeah, we
and
would
they
need
think
to
they
know
should
that.
be getting it, we have not been hearing from those people.
There's some providers, I believe, that pay extra to that person and
Mhm.
don't count the rest, but I know that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, we would want to know that information.
They did,
Um,
sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, and it
So
doesn't
instead of
necessarily have to be
providing
the
that
individual
respite,
themselves.
they
as
should,
well.
They would pay the caregiver an extra amount and then just be like, okay. Got it, yeah,
It's not. bill
Which-
rest. Not bill rest.
right.
But they're not
There's-
providing
they're
rest
not
to
providing
the
rest.
actual
Yeah.
caregiver. They're
We're
just
paying
getting,
them extra and just saying, it's yours.
yeah, that would not be compliant with the service
Correct.
definition and would be problematic. So if we encounter situations like that, we need to know that, because that provider is vulnerable on an audit for sure. Not to mention the more important piece, that the caregiver is not getting any respite
Right.
from providing that, and how long are they gonna be able to maintain that,
Right.
right? Yeah.
I have two questions. My first one is I'm involved a lot with hands and autism, and I hear from a lot of people that they have trouble finding providers or staff for individuals with like really high support needs, specifically a lot of times behaviors. And I wanted to see if there's like anything that we're doing to try to get people that have trouble getting services to be able to get those services.
Yeah, that's a good question, Lexi. And it's something that we've, I think as a system, not just beads, but just as a system, because we see this even with some people that are more medically complex, right? Like, how do we support individuals? Knowing there are some capacity issues, in the system and outside the system. You know, how do we leverage every resource available to an individual to best support them? So we have had some, as Jim mentioned, a lot of work through the innovation pilot projects around behavior support specifically, and have some good information, really good information from some of those pilot projects that might inform some changes or modifications to how behavior support services and supports are delivered today. Not sure about what that all looks like and when we might be able to implement some of those. But I do want to note what we can do for November or for this winter is not, once we get this set of amendments out in the winter and get those implemented, we're not stopping there. You know, we may have some limitations in how much we can do right now. But right now, and what we're planning to do to implement in winter is not waiver reset. So there's other opportunities in the future to look at some of those broader, more systemic kind of changes. Does that help? Yes.
It does. And I think like it would be, I know like PA home care is like a totally separate entity, but I don't know if there is a way that DDRS can work with like PA home care as well, because this is a little off topic, but there's been Laura and I have been going back and forth with my PA company about my aides being able to take me out in the community. We've been debating with them on that for about a year. And also I've been losing staff because of behaviors. So it's a struggle with my PA company right now.
Yeah, no, I think Lexi, I appreciate that because, and you said it's not really the same as waiver, you use different wording, I'm sorry, but it is important, I think, because as we look to support people in the way they want to be and need to be supported, we really do have to look at, you know, every resource out there, if that's PA, if that's unpaid services and supports as well, and helping people build those connections.
But they are delivered in a different manner. The prior authorization of the home health services than the waiver
A
services.
lot of the PA companies, apply the Medicare,
Mhm,
the definition of homebound is instead of the Medicaid.
mhm.
And that seems to be the biggest problem is, they don't think that they're allowed to leave
Leave
the
the
home.
Right.
And that's,
Yeah.
it's huge. Well, there needs to be some kind of re-education.
I think there was
on
an IHC people
There
working on
was.
that,
I think
it's specifically telling those same providers that that is not the case, and if we need to reissue that, we can,
Yeah.
but that's been addressed a few times with that.
We try to
with
do a
other
lot of
providers.
provider education too, and it's quite the struggle.
Yeah, the director of my PA company, I guess, from what I'm understanding, went to his regional director, and his regional director is even saying like, no, she has to be in the home when, like, they can't leave the home when they're on the clock, kind of thing. And that's like, I guess, according to the director of my PA company, that's coming from the regional director of my agency that I use, my provider. So
yeah,
it's a struggle.
Yeah, it may be a transportation issue. PA does not pay for transportation, so how do you get from the home to the community?
I have my own van that people that anybody who my friends, my family, my PAC
provides-
services staff drives my van.
No, they
Yeah, they can.
they can. Yep.
Yeah.
The PA
So we'll-
driver drive?
Yep.
We'll dig out that IHCP bulletin maybe and get it.
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use Team Select, so if you could get it to Team Select, that'd be great.
I mean, saying that we can't, from even if it's at a CEO level, that's a choice.
Right.
That's not anything that, again, we have not dictated. that it
Yeah, I
has
was
to
to say,
stay
it could
us.
be the entities, the
The
providers,
entity is
that
making
they
that
don't allow.
determination.
So I.
Yeah, we don't have any control over that, but what we can do is make sure that they know
that
what's
they
allowable.
understand that it's
Well, I know
allowed.
that they can, they can go ahead and do that, but there's a lot of times where they even negate like public transportation or Uber, and is that an option for them to do that?
For the home health
Yeah. to
provider?
negate that.
Yeah, again, I think that's probably more of a company decision. or
Who are
provider.
they sending to provide the service? Is that how- Yeah.
Just for the sake.
Again, I think we can, from the home health side, we can address some of these issues. I don't want to get too far off track
Right.
with your other waiver items, but I do think, to your point, they are interconnected.
Yeah.
Holly, before you move on to the next one, you had mentioned something about behavior support, and I'm very familiar with those projects.
Yes.
That were there. The people who I represent in ABC and just behavior support providers in general are very interested in kind of the last thing that you were saying, which it sounded to me like was that this winter's waiver probably wasn't going to implement any new changes in behavior support. Is that correct?
I don't know that yet. Again, we don't know, we don't know anything for sure about the winter amendments until we get some additional information.
Where are you going to get that?
Could I add maybe a bit of clarification that
Sure.
might help? I think, and Holly, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, so please excuse
Go
me. I think the point we're trying to make is the fall winter amendments won't really be what we would consider waiver reset, like these big redesign pieces. We are looking at not just some of those compliance issues. There are some areas that we would like to make some steps forward in around services or what have you. When Holly is saying that we don't yet know, we all know we're in the midst of legislative session. So we really need to see, are there going to be legislative mandates? Are we going to have budgetary restrictions or constraints, which need to be considered, and other directives? So that is why, if you sense on our part, there's just a bit of a hesitation, because while, we have thoughts and plans, we do have to wait for, for that final outcome. So we will have more in the coming months on those winter amendments. I don't know if that helps.
No, it's.
I
It
guess
may
I
have
would
made it more
say-
complicated.
And I think we have said it in this meeting, in this group previously.
we are still interested in moving toward a waiver reset.
Absolutely.
Which means we're not adding something substantially different or new to the current set of array, because it's our anticipation that then we would need to either bring that or readjust that into a new set of waivers where it would no longer be available. So we're not gonna build something super robust in the existing array to tear it down and have to rebuild it somewhere else. And so if we make any changes to services, there are going to be tweaks and adjustments where we feel like we can make some short-term gains, moving us in the direction that we want to head. Probably not totally upsetting the apple cart, and so to speak, in terms of the existing service array. But again, even some of those tweaks and adjustments are very much understanding the landscape of the budget and how that shakes out and what we'll actually be able to realize in the course of the next few months.
Yeah.
So is that what you guys are thinking with the peer mentoring that we thought we were going to do at the end of last year? Right, from our project that we were hoping that peer mentoring became a service. I think we're continuing to look at where does the peer mentoring fit in the overall, and it's probably a waiver reset because it's a new structure, new.
Needs to be part of a
array.
larger.
Yeah.
Change.
What if it could fall under family, the family training? I know Quillo is kind of under family, I think Quillo's being billed under family training right now. I wonder if peer mentoring could even possibly as part of Quillo Life Course Connect, kind of how we did for the FSSA grant for the fellowship in 23-24.
I think that's something we can
could
look
take
at.
back, yeah.
Absolutely. If there's a
Sure.
budget impact, obviously with utilization of FCAR as a result of that, that would play into what we're able to actually to do there. Sorry, I don't mean to.
No, you're,
I know, I feel like I'm stealing, I don't want
Yeah.
to steal your show.
no, it's okay. You all didn't, no, I appreciate it. So.
And this reset, still the goal is kind of 2027 for it to be like fully in place.
So that's what we're planning for at this point. But again, you know, I think that Lexi, the main thing is what Kathy noted is everything we're doing today is a step towards waiver reset. But waiver reset is still in our plans. 2027 was the last kind of ballpark date we were talking about as a group here. But we're just not there yet to start those activities. So
I understand. I have one more question. So this legislative session has everything really up in the air and just kind of scary for a lot of people. But when it wraps up, you know, things will kind of be in place, a little more predictable for a while. But then, like, I know this is kind of like out there and might be unpredictable, but do we kind of expect the 2026 legislative session to be just as scary and up in the air, or no, because it's not election session? I forget what that's called.
Not a budget. It won't be a budget.
Oh yeah, that's what it's called. Yeah. So maybe not as scary next year, and we might be able to have a little more you know, predictability on what to kind of expect.
yeah, Lexi, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna add, I think regardless, every legislative session is different. And we, you know, we truly, it's always a bit unpredictable. Each is unique. I mean, obviously there are different representatives, there are different economic issues, there are different social issues. So it's always a bit of an unknown. And we will, as we always have, work within that framework. We work closely back and forth during legislative session and keeping an eye on informing what is occurring and understanding what is occurring so that we are poised when session ends to be able to move forward. But it's a very good question. I think it's just always a bit unpredictable. It's hard to say what next year will look like.
For sure, that makes sense. I'm still learning because I didn't really know much about like legislative session.
But you're right,
If you have a crystal ball for us, Lexi, we would love
You know.
that.
I wish. I wish. I might keep
But
that
yeah,
all to myself if I get one though.
Yeah. It's a very good question.
Good question.
It
yeah.
is.
Okay, Holly, I'm gonna move you along.
Yeah, okay, you're moving me along. All right. So we've been talking about these winter amendments. One of the things that I do want to highlight for our group here today is we do anticipate calling a special meeting of this group and probably around late May to talk about extraordinary care definitions. And we will put forth a definition for this group to take a look at and have some discussion around. So just wanted to highlight that so that you all knew that would likely, you'll be watching for an invite.
It'll be virtual.
Yeah,
because
we
won't be
can
able to
do
get
it
work.
virtually. Recognizing everyone's time. Yeah. this-
Like in a month, basically,
gonna
most
try and
likely
use-
it'll,
Yes.
we'll try, yeah, the goal, and I'm almost positive I can tell you,
We'll
is
use
May
the-
21st, which is the Wednesday we would typically meet. Most likely starting at 10. I don't know, Holly, we don't know the time yet, but probably an hour. I don't do think. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I
So,
think that's enough.
so yeah, I'll send out the Zoom. It'll be a private Zoom. And I'll get that onto your calendars really soon. So.
And I think to set the stage, this really is an extraordinary care definition. Obviously, this is related to the CMS requirement that if a legally responsible individual is allowed to provide what we term as personal care services, then the state must have an extraordinary care definition. We are looking specifically at attendant care. Extraordinary care and attendant care as a personal care service. So just to kind of set the stage for that.
Thank you, Kelly.
Has this been well defined in other states? Are there, maybe better, are there best practices for other states in their definition?
We
I think we have some.
We have
Okay.
looked at other.
We have
states,
some
definitely.
examples,
That might-
and
Yeah.
yeah, that will,
But to also prepare you, it is quite.
it's
very
all
long.
over the place.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, and because you, similar to what, when you've seen a waiver.
Yeah.
You've seen a waiver, every state's waivers are very different in terms of the population supported, and so. Legally responsible individuals applies to parents as well as spouses. And so when you're talking about pediatric versus adult, even within that, an extraordinary care
Right.
lens is going to look very differently because
Yeah.
the nature of the care being provided is just slightly different there, so.
So that will be a working, quote unquote, working session.
It's not like a typical.
It won't be a
Right.
typical meeting, it'll be a specially called meeting for that purpose.
Next slide, please. So we had some questions from self advocates that we wanted just to provide some data on. So there was, and we appreciate the feedback and the questions. So one of the questions was about people that perhaps are only utilizing case management on a waiver and no other service. So we pulled some information here that you can see the number of individuals receiving only case management. Now, I do want to clarify that we need to, we're going to fine tune this data a little bit because this is people who only had case management for some part of their plan. So this is probably a little high because some individuals, when they first start waiver services, they may only have case management for a period of time before they add in additional services. So we're going to drill down and try to get a little more specific on this. But you can see here the numbers of people that get case management only for some part of their plan. I think something important to note is it is okay for someone to only receive case management. For some people, all they need or want, could be either, is someone to help them navigate,
Yes.
right? Navigate systems, navigate different processes, navigate connections to other services and supports like VR or First Steps or whatever it may be. So it is okay for individuals to only have case management. In fact, if that's all someone needs, that's all, that's all they should get, right? If their needs
Not
change,
necessarily, but
they have some additional ability to get, or some ability to get some additional support. The other thing I will note, you'll see that on the health and wellness and the TBI waiver, no one gets just case management. They can get just case management. However, unfortunately, the IT system currently used for those waivers require an additional service. So the number that you see there is not a true reflection of people's needs. There may be people on those waivers that only want or need case management. So that will change in July as we implement the health and wellness and TBI waivers in the BEADS portal.
So this also, I think I'm correct, but correct me if I'm incorrect. This is not inclusive of state plan services
No,
that
this
they may
is
be accessing in
correct.
addition to case management.
correct.
Okay.
This only reflects HCBS or waiver services. It doesn't tell us anything about state plan. It doesn't tell us anything about educational services or EPSD, early periodic screening diagnostic, any of that. It is strictly waiver, what's on their plan. Yes.
I think
With the people on CIH, just,
excuse me.
sorry, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
You probably couldn't hear Kim was starting to speak. I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
No, I'm sorry. It's quiet. That's my fault. I apologize.
I think what I was gonna say, I think Lexi might have been the one who asked this question before, and I just kind of want to point out that sometimes it's okay for you to only get case management and nothing else, but sometimes the reason you get case management and nothing else is because what you need isn't available. So is there any way to figure out that number? Probably.
So that's,
It would be nice to know the difference, I understand.
Yeah.
Like if you're a first step parent, you probably don't need anything else,
right.
I get that and I acknowledge that, but if the question is like, does my client need respite care? But there are no respite providers in my county that are available and willing to work with someone, and so that's a problem, and so figuring out the problem versus the okay.
Yeah, so it's difficult to, without doing a deep dive on every single person only getting case management, right? And also recognizing that the waiver has certain things that in a certain purpose that we have to stay true to. And some of those needs that individuals have, there's other resources for those. So it's kind of complicated. But I do think as case managers, they would probably have some good ideas of what are there things out there that people are needing that would be within the realm of home and community-based services, right? But it's also, I think, your point is, what are those services that people need that would align with the purpose of HCBS that we could look at for waiver reset, right? What are those?
Or even within the current system of waivers that just, need to be improved, which I know you all tried with, like, in my example, when you raise the limits so that hopefully the employees get more pay, then maybe there's more respite workers in my example from earlier.
So, Holly, one other statistic, and I don't know if this is something that Shelley could look up or something like that, is, this is obviously instructed to a point, but there are tons of people across the state, particularly in rural areas, where the only service that they get other than case management is behavior support, and that's for the exact reason that you're talking about, where respite and ACT and some of these other things are completely unavailable. And in some cases, sometimes people are like, well, I really like the rec benefits. Well, I guess I'll just put all my money in behavior support and get a little bit of that sort of on the side too, because the behavior clinician is able to be there a couple hours a day. And I know that that sometimes creates some friction when people are saying, that's not behavior support. But if somebody's not getting anything, I think it's a big deal. And frankly, that statistic isn't gonna show you as much as also having a good behavior support. Because you'll see a lot of people just have those two, but they just have those two, there's a good chance that they like some other things and they just can't get it.
And I think people would be surprised just from I think we touched on this earlier, but when I first got on the family supports waiver, I lived in Indianapolis and moved back home to Lake County and now live in more of a suburb. And honestly, I've found it easier to get services and providers in the suburb area that I live in now than I did in Indy. Indy, at least back in 2022, had such a DSP crisis. It was so hard to get PAC services. It was so hard to find any agency that didn't have a long waiting list for PAC services. And, that's just an example of, I think somebody showed a statistic earlier that actually, like, rural communities almost kind of, or suburban communities almost kind of have an advantage and just more in some ways than like Indy. Like Indy's just, the DSP crisis is so real in Indy, or at least it was 3 years ago.
Thanks, Lexi.
Yeah,
That's a good-
thank
that's what we were talking about earlier, the rural.
Molly, I have a question about that too.
Mhm.
For the HWW and the TBI right now. As an independent case management company, we wait until, there's another service on there and then they're provided choice.
Mhm.
How will the AAAs be providing choice if they only need case management? How will that look?
Yeah, so to speak to, I think your underlying question is we have been doing some work with AAAs about offering choice of case management and what that looks like. And when that needs to occur, and we'll continue to do that because that's a cornerstone of HCBS, right? So as someone begins into a waiver, they should be offered that choice of case management to work on. Yeah.
I just have a clarifying question. I
Sure.
wasn't sure about the data. So TBI and the health and wellness right now, like this number would change once they're in the beat system because it's just showing. They can have case management on its own, but because of it's a technical.
Yeah, historically, as those waivers were administered by another division, it was individuals needed to have some other service than just case management, and the IT system supported that process. We recognize that individuals may only need or want case management, right? So the IT system come July 1st will reflect that, as will training with current case managers on the health wellness TBI waivers, that if a person just needs case management and just wants case management, that's okay. That's okay. All right.
Kelly, I'm gonna move you.
Yeah, I figured you work. So this is just some information we wanted to share. I think it's important, especially when we start talking about, and we talked about this a little bit earlier about cost neutrality. At the end of the day, we are here to support individuals, and our waiver services are to support them in ways that align with home and community-based services. The cost neutrality is again looked at as a kind of a programmatic cost neutrality, right? But that means that in order to stay cost neutral, we're going to see some people receiving a little bit of service, maybe just case management, maybe case management and a little bit of PAC, in addition to services outside the waiver, perhaps. And then we're going to have some that are going to be above that typical cost neutrality. And it really does take having some people below there to make it all work, right? So we included this here. I don't have a lot of time. So, but just wanted to show the services, the more common services that you see here, of course, across the top. This is CIH only. is the res hab. Now that includes all the different res hab and support, right? The daily rates and the res 10 and 20. And then you'll see other services, the behavior management is right up there. And the other services available, you can kind of see just what those trends look like based on state fiscal year 2024. We also took the mean, median, and the mode of the CIH waiver. So the mean is the average budget. So if you took everyone on the CIH waiver in state fiscal year 2024 and averaged them out, the average budget is $93,000 a year. The median is the middle value when you look at the whole list of those budgets. The median is going to be the middle when you look smallest to largest. So that's 99,000. And then the mode, which is the one we see most often in that same data set, is the 2,274. Again, capturing those people that are getting case management only at some point, potentially newer onto that waiver.
What's the high? You know what the max is on it?
With the highest budget?
Yeah, just
I don't have that in front of me, but it's.
I mean, are we talking 200,000? Are we talking?
No, we have budgets over 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're on that.
Thanks.
Yeah, the range is very large.
Yeah, okay.
And that we would expect.
Yeah, of course.
A wide range, right? Everybody's needs are different. I think, yeah, we would expect a wide range. So.
Holly, just as a suggestion, like if we reproduce this,
Mhm.
that column with the codes, we might want to spell out what those are, because I think people
That
might
needs
not
to- yeah.
know what those
Yeah.
abbreviations are.
And it's very small. Yes, thank you.
And Holly, the paid claims in millions, that's all in, right? That's not state share, that's not. Fed share, it's all
Correct.
in.
That's full claims. Yeah. Or what the provider claimed, I should say.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which
Thank
would
you.
be this. Yeah. All right, you want to move me on?
Yeah.
Jess?
Yep.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about the level of care assessment representative again, because we are very, very close. We're 11 weeks from go live. Again, this just impacts health and wellness and the TBI waivers, well, in the pathways. It also is a continuation of the work that vendor Maximus does under our pre-admission screening and resident review. So again, this is one statewide vendor that's going to do nursing facility level of care assessments and determination recommendations starting July 1st. It does not impact at all the family support or the CIH waivers. And it is launching at the same time as those pediatric tools we talked about before. So this, I think, one thing I wanted to note for sure is that level of care assessment representative Maximus is the vendor, will be doing those initial nursing facility levels of care and the annuals for those on the health and wellness and TBI waivers for the purposes of today. So they will be communicating with those individuals and will be training the case managers to make sure that individuals know everyone on those waivers will get a formal communication, letting them know that Maximus will be reaching out to do their annual assessments. Case managers will be supporting the individuals, helping them understand the importance of getting that annual reassessment. You know, so that their services, so that their waivers can.
Will those all be in person or?
No, some of them will be virtual. Yeah. Yeah, probably most. Yeah.
So when you say, and you read complete nursing facility level of care, is that still the pass hours too?
It includes PASSR. So the pre-admission screening and resident review, what we call the PASSR, is a process that has to be completed for individuals that wish to be admitted to a nursing facility, a Medicaid certified nursing facility. So the Pass Our program includes a lot of different things, including nursing facility level of care. It includes what's called a level 1 assessment and sometimes a level 2 assessment, but that's sits over here with the level of care being part of that process. Maximus does those levels of care for nursing facility admissions today.
They do the pass already.
Yep, they do all of PASSAR in Indiana, in other states. But they do that today already. So this vendor is used to doing nursing facility level of care assessments. They've been doing it in Indiana since like 2016, I think. So they'll be doing that for home and community-based services that require nursing facility level of care effective July 1. Does that make sense?
Question about the notification, two questions, I guess. Do you know approximately when individuals and families will start to receive that notification? And will there also be in the notification, maybe some slight education as how an annual reassessment? Because I think a lot of people don't realize that that's happening in case managers are just doing that as part of their natural process and don't realize that a reassessment is taking place. So is there that might be a shock to people that are, I mean, will there be any education in the letter that kind of says like this is something that has been happening annually already? It's just who's doing it.
Yes, we actually have the letters just about ready. But yeah, it kind of talks about this annual reassessment is required. This is why, and this is who will be reaching out to you, and your case manager is still involved. You know, they just don't do that piece anymore, essentially. Obviously, we're much more articulate in the letter than what I just said, but in plain language, it's, you know, everything's okay. You're still, you know, you're receiving services. This is your annual reassessment, and this entity will be doing that moving forward. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out at this number. It's probably going to be June, just because I think if we send it too early, I don't know about you all, but I get something and it's like 3 months in advance or a month, 2 months in advance, and it just goes in a little pile on my counter. So it'll probably be June before we send those out. Yeah.
You know, right now, between for the TBI,
Mhm.
whether they meet the nursing level
Mhm.
or the institutional level, we kind of put a Band-Aid on it for now, but will that be more of a, I guess, more of a process that is in or online with the software program for case managers?
So, and to clarify what Laura's asking about, so the traumatic brain injury waiver, individuals may access that with nursing facility level of care or with the intermediate care facility for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities level of care, which is required for the family support waiver and the CIH waiver. So today, and moving forward, if an individual applies for the TBI waiver, they're assessed for nursing facility level of care. If they don't meet that, they're assessed for ICFID level of care if they have an intellectual or developmental disability. And it's a pretty manual kind of process for case managers and the state. Today, we are looking to improve that and make it less manual. That's not going to happen July 1st, though. It's going to take a little bit longer than that. But we will continue the process we have until we're able to do that. All right. A couple did you knows, real quickly, again, just to respond to some questions that we've received. So what is on the screen, I'm not going to read it to you because I have 2 minutes left, and then Jess is going to move me on right out the door.
I won't, I promise.
Okay. Is the definition of transportation for the family support waiver and the CIH waiver. So our current definition on those waivers allow for the use of Uber, Lyft, rideshare opportunities for individuals. It has to go through a provider, right? Like a gift card or something like that for Uber or Lyft, but that is allowable. We are looking at how we can recommunicate this to individuals and providers, how we can build something into our provider module to make that clear or more clear. But that is definitely allowable on the family support waiver and the CIH waiver. We talked briefly about some definitions and alignment and that sort of thing. The transportation on the health and wellness and traumatic brain injury waivers is defined a little differently. It's a different population. So we will look and are looking at that and what options we might have there. But currently it is absolutely allowable. And I guess from my perspective, promotes some independence if people can use Uber and Lyft, and it is allowable.
I have a question.
Huh?
I have a question about that, if I'm not cutting anybody off. I heard that on the family supports waiver, like the I guess pay rate, I don't know the wording for it, but I guess like what the FSW pays for transportation is different than what CIH pays for transportation. And I was told that on FSW that I guess pay rate, I don't know if it's for mileage or what, isn't enough to cover an Uber or Lyft. It's more enough to cover like Indigo access or Open Door or whatever, or like transportation with a provider for like day services and stuff.
Yeah, so the rates are the same, Lexi, so we might wanna, connect with the case manager to help you navigate that with the provider. Cause the rates are the same on the FS
And the
I actually didn't hear that from a case manager. I heard it from someone else, but
okay.
And the allowance.
Yeah, the
Yeah, the allowance and all is the same.
Thanks,
so-
Lexi, because I think that's the thing that we want to try to clarify for people, because there's
lot
there's
of
a lot of misinformation, especially, and I think, Sean, you might have been the one to suggest to bring this up, and maybe it was Lexi, I can't remember, but we wanted to, because I think there's just misinformation about this particular service and who can use it and who can't. And so I think those are good things to bring up so that we can clarify, especially on this public platform, because people watch this, and so we want to make sure that what the information is out there is correct. So thanks for bringing
yeah,
that up.
Sean's a big advocate for this because it's something, yeah.
Yeah. I
So
think it's confusing just because it's billed by trip. That's what I think the confusion is.
Okay.
As you think about communicating this out, again, you think of organizations like ours, getting to amplify your message, I think it's gonna be, the more we get that out. So if you develop stuff, keep that in mind, shoot it our way.
Okay,
Support
thanks,
that too.
Jared. Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
With that in mind, Holly, I know there was, I think, another.
I think there's one
There's
more.
others.
Yeah, so we had some other questions and some of this we've covered already. Just that, but we did have a question. There does still seem to sometimes be this myth out there, that if an individual doesn't use their waiver, they lose it in terms of how much they use. So I just want to make sure we are all on the same page that if someone is, for example, on the family support waiver, and let's just pick an easy number because I'm not great with numbers, $5,000 or $15,000 in 2024. And then their plan starts in 2025. They still have, and even in 2024, they have access to the 26,482. The next year, their budget is not reduced based on what they did or didn't use. It is still the same amount available. Having said that, you'll see I put in here about the state plan services, right? Those need to be used before waiver services, and waiver services should be commensurate with the need. And there is that whole cost neutrality, but people are not, it is not a use it all or lose it system. It is use what you need. No, you can't. Yeah, you can't roll it over. Yeah.
Thanks, Holly.
It is that plan year.
So that same logic was to see if somebody had a $95,000 budget and used 15, they still would have 95, and that would.
Yes.
That's not gonna change.
Correct. Right. So again, it really is, people use what they need. There's no pressure, there's no, it can be a not good thing, right? To provide more to someone than what they need, right? We are here to support people to be as independent as they can be. So, it can be detrimental to provide more than someone needs in some situations. So again, just, there does not need to be fear about losing losing funds if you don't utilize the services. So I think that's my last place. Sorry. Oh,
And I can, you want me to mention this, Holly?
yeah, if you
This
don't-
was just something
please.
that, we had a suggestion from Talia that I thought was maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe, or Lexi, just to share, this is again, because we're in a public meeting, just to share, the contact information for Medicaid recipient and provider fraud. This is, if you Google it, you will also find this, but, just to bring up that sometimes people don't know where to go, especially if they want to, report any sort of recipient fraud. And so just thought I'd put this on here. It'll be in the slides as well. The email, the hotline, mail, fax, and then you can also click on the slides for the policy. And reports can be made anonymously and all reports are kept confidential. So just wanted to share that out to you guys. I think most of you maybe know where it is, but, again, and it's not just recipient, not just Medicaid waiver fraud. Obviously, there are many types of programs where there could be fraud. So just sharing that out there for you guys, if you want to share that. Yeah, go ahead.
Story about something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so, in January this year, I had someone use my food stamps in Chicago. I did report it, but they haven't gotten back with me. I did call again and then reported some new information. Still haven't heard back. So I know that they said that they made a new law that you couldn't get your money back for how much was stolen because of the new law that was passed. So it was hard for me the month of January because I had to go to food banks and I didn't really, my food stamps go on automatically and I was like, this is odd. There's nothing on there. And then we called and called and called and tried. And then we finally got to someone. They need to make the way to get to the people and food stamps easier instead of just going through so many hoops, because we went through so many hoops trying to get a live operator. And it took us, how many times did it take us, Darlene? Yeah.
We can share that too. Let's see. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can help you. We'll call the manager. Just keep going on.
Yeah.
That's right. That's the way to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
It works.
Makes me think of that.
It works. I'm not gonna lie, but anyway, okay, sorry, moving on to the parking lot. So does anyone else have anything? We have about 7 minutes or so, that they want to share that's related or that maybe wants to get, added. We do have the special meeting, as Kelly mentioned, that I just sent out the calendar invite because I know people's calendars, especially in May, are pretty crazy. And then the next meeting in person will be June 18th here at the Government Center. Oh, sorry, Lexi, did you come off? I'm sorry.
I did. First of all, I wanted to say, Talia, I live near Chicago, so if I have to run over some toes with my power chair, I will.
Thank
My
you.
question was, why did the contract with FSSA and the Arc of Indiana not continue for my friend and peer and CCIR? And then kind of a follow-up question to that is, whoever is going to be doing the contract, which I heard it's going to be in-house within FSSA, is there going to be opportunities for self-advocates to continue to do my friend and peer and CCIR just through FSSA instead of the Arc of Indiana?
I mean, I can talk about CCR. I don't want to talk about contracts. So every contract comes to an end at some point. There are state procurements, policies that, we work within the framework for the length of contracts. They're not able to just go on, go on and on and on. Some of the funding, I believe, in that contract was through maybe grant funding that doesn't exist anymore. So when funding ends, oftentimes programs, programs will phase out. I can speak, this is Teresa, I can speak to the career counseling information and referral services. We are planning to, the number of individuals who need that service has decreased so much in the last, I don't know, 6, 7 years. When we started this process, there were around 4,000, I think, individuals employed at sub minimum wage. And now I'm looking to Kyle, there's a thousand, less than 1,000. So it's much more achievable for us to, you know, to absorb that without that additional cost of an external contractor. In terms of peer involvement, yes, I think there will be some opportunity. We're navigating that right now to figure out what our opportunities might be there. So more to come on that.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, thank you. What about, does anybody have information about my friend and peer? Or money follows the person?
Yeah, I can speak. Oh,
Go ahead, Holly, take it
Okay.
away.
I can speak to that, Lexi. Yeah, that has to go out for the request for proposals. That's just as Teresa noted, the contracting process is pretty defined by IDEA or Indiana Department of Administration, and it's time for that contract to just go back out for competitive bids.
Thanks, Lexi.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I would just like to add, and I think I've said this originally when we talked about employment, we really need to keep an eye out for our folks who are living in the ICFs and how it is a disincentive for them to have a job, and that there's no supported employment follow along included for those folks. So we're missing an opportunity for employment for a decent chunk of human beings.
Yeah, I think Holly and I are gonna talk about that and talk to you about adding that to a conversation.
Yeah.
Right? I have that on my list.
Every time we talk about employment.
I know, I've got it on my list to talk to Holly about.
That's what you do, you have to, yeah.
Okay, you guys have that invite. I did just send it. It is team, we actually can use the Teams. Please don't forward that unless it's a private meeting, so it's not gonna be open to the public. We don't have to make that open to the public because it's a special session. So if you can't attend, let me know. I know it's soon, so you know, I understand that May is probably pretty crazy, so.
And we can gather like input.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, we'll send out some information. I just wanna get, I just wanna get you the invite at least to hold because I know it will be crazy before we can get out of the internet.
Look at us with
Yeah,
what,
and
3
we have
minutes
time for
left?
video. Yeah, I'll send out the videos, the link for the videos. Well, Holly and I have like a meeting.
Sure. Legislative
Thank you. Bye,
session.
guys.
Sailing as always.
I